The fateful decision of their father forever altered the destinies of two royal princesses. Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie faced a fate one would hardly wish upon their most sworn enemy. In the blink of an eye, as if by the wave of an evil magic wand, they transformed from beloved public figures into outcasts. It was hard to believe what had happened when their names suddenly vanished from the guest list of Europe's most prestigious social event. The decision made by Buckingham Palace regarding the princesses would have astonished even the most seasoned and cynical royal observers. "We were politely advised to stay home." These words, uttered by one of the princesses, concealed a true tragedy, whose scale surpassed the wildest assumptions, and subsequent events deeply shocked even King Charles. While the Spencer sisters dazzled in luxurious pink gowns, radiating splendor, Prince Andrew's daughters endured perhaps the most terrible night of their lives. However, as it later turned out, this was merely the prelude to a real nightmare. What was actually said to the princesses by the organizers of this grand event? What was the Queen's reaction to the unfolding scandal? And what exorbitant price did the innocent daughters have to pay for their father's transgressions? Now, the truth, long carefully guarded within the walls of Buckingham Palace, is to be revealed. A story of such a rapid fall that it is truly breathtaking, with an ending no one could have predicted. This narrative should prepare the reader for a profound shock, for what happened to the princesses completely overturns conventional notions of royal justice. The setting was the renowned British Museum in London. That evening was destined to go down in the annals of social history. The Pink Ball, as this grand event was called, was conceived as a magnificent and fitting response to New York's legendary high-fashion celebration. The organizers dedicated long months to meticulous preparation. Every minute detail was considered with exquisite precision, and each invitation was dispatched with truly royal scrupulousness. From the very beginning of the evening, the museum's main entrance was illuminated by continuous camera flashes. Inside, an atmosphere of refined luxury prevailed. The rustle of precious fabrics, the shimmer of diamonds. Under crystal chandeliers, the intoxicating aroma of expensive perfumes mingled with the delicate scent of fresh flowers. The crème de la crème of society flocked to the majestic halls. Celebrities, influential politicians, and representatives of Britain's most eminent aristocratic families. Each outfit was a true work of art. Each appearance, an event destined to be the subject of discussion in every social column the next day. The theme of this unforgettable evening was both mysterious and alluring. Ancient India, living traditions. The organizers meticulously crafted a deep connection between the ball and the museum's current exhibition, entirely dedicated to the rich culture and art of the Indian subcontinent. The key dress code requirement was the color pink. Guests were expected to appear in outfits of the most diverse shades, from the softest powdery pink to daring, vibrant fuchsia, each symbolizing luxury, refined femininity, and genuine royal grandeur. British media had already rushed to declare this grand event a direct rival to the famous Met Gala. Such a statement undoubtedly sounds quite audacious. The New York Ball, hosted annually by the Costume Institute, had for decades confidently held the status of the most prestigious and significant event of the year in both the world of high fashion and high society. However, London decided to challenge this established tradition, aiming to create its own unique history and gather under one roof all that the British elite rightfully prides itself on. And, judging by the very first hours of this celebratory evening, the planned vision was successfully coming to life. Guests arrived one after another, like stars appearing in the night sky. Photographers' cameras clicked incessantly, creating a continuous kaleidoscope of flashes, while journalists hastily scribbled their notes, eager to capture every moment. Cameramen meticulously filmed every step, every subtle gesture, every genuine smile. The festive atmosphere, filled with the anticipation of something magical, captivated everyone present. The museum transformed into magnificent scenery, as if from the pages of a fairy tale, where beauty, immense wealth, and impeccable exquisite taste reigned supreme. However, amidst all this glittering splendor and unimaginable luxury, the absence of two key figures, whose arrival everyone eagerly awaited, was particularly striking. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, daughters of Prince Andrew, Duke of York, and beloved granddaughters of the late Queen Elizabeth II. Their names were undoubtedly on the coveted guest list. Moreover, the event organizers had placed special hopes on their presence and counted on it first and foremost. As is well known, the presence of royal blood bestows a truly special, unique status on any social event. Two princesses at the ball were not merely ordinary guests. It would have been an unequivocal sign of approval from the monarchy itself, a symbol of its favor. Press representatives had prepared their cameras in advance, specifically setting them to photograph the royals. Stylists, in turn, speculated on what outfits the sisters would wear, what exquisite jewels they would choose from the crown's countless treasures, and which renowned designers would be honored to dress the princesses for this very special evening. Beatrice and Eugenie had always possessed an astonishing talent for attracting public attention. They had literally grown up in the public eye. Their weddings became national events, captivating millions. Every appearance at social gatherings was meticulously analyzed by leading fashion commentators and critics. Nevertheless, the luxurious seats specially designated for the royal guests remained untouched, empty. Hour after hour passed. Guests gradually filled the spacious halls, taking their places. Official speeches began, followed by ceremonial music, but the princesses were still nowhere to be seen. At first, this caused only mild bewilderment among those present. Then a quiet whisper swept through the halls, which soon escalated into open, persistent questions. What had actually happened? Why had the two princesses, who always graced such receptions with such elegance, suddenly vanished from public view at such an important moment? Initially, perfectly innocuous theories arose to explain their absence. Perhaps one of the sisters felt unwell, or unforeseen family circumstances had arisen. Both have children, and little ones, as is known, are full of surprises. It was possible that one of the young heirs, be it a prince or princess, felt poorly, and the mothers decided to stay home to care for them. A busy schedule could not be ruled out either. The royal family operates on a strict schedule planned months in advance, including official visits, charity events, and ceremonial occasions. It was entirely plausible that at the very last moment, a more important obligation related to their royal duties arose, something that could not be declined. However, those who had closely followed the news in recent weeks understood perfectly well that the reason for their absence was far more serious and troubling. The answer to this question lay not within the walls of the museum, where they were expected to arrive, but far beyond, in the majestic corridors of Buckingham Palace, in newspaper headlines that grew increasingly sharp, biting, and merciless, in a scandal that shook the British monarchy to its foundations, in a situation that developed rapidly and relentlessly, like a powerful avalanche, sweeping away everything in its path. To grasp the true reason why the royal daughters found themselves isolated on the very evening they were meant to shine brightest, one had to go back not just a day or a week, but many months, to the moment when the first barely perceptible cracks began to appear on the seemingly immutable facade of royal life, to the day when their father's world began to crumble rapidly, burying beneath its ruins everything they had known, cherished, and believed in since early childhood. The subject was Prince Andrew, the third child of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth and His Royal Highness Prince Philip. The Duke of York, once considered one of the most popular and beloved members of the royal family, a celebrated military pilot, and a hero of the Falklands War, was always charming, charismatic, and constantly in the media spotlight. His marriage to Sarah Ferguson in 1986 became one of the year's major social events, captivating millions. The birth of their daughters, Princess Beatrice in 1988 and Princess Eugenie in 1990, transformed him into a caring father and a public favorite. Years passed. The prince and his wife divorced, but managed to maintain a friendly relationship, a rather rare occurrence for the royal family. Their daughters grew up, received excellent educations, fell in love, and married. Life seemed stable, predictable, and relatively calm, as much as it can be for members of the royal family. But beneath this outward propriety and serenity, a terrible storm was brewing, one that would soon erupt. Clouds gathered on the horizon, portending an inevitable storm. Connections once carefully forged, acquaintances made many years ago, and decisions taken in the distant past began to boomerang back, crashing down upon the royal family. Names that seemingly had no place alongside high royal titles unexpectedly surfaced in the public sphere. Accusations, now impossible to ignore, rained down one after another. The press, which had recently idolized the prince, now turned on him with the fury and ruthlessness of a hunting pack ready to tear down its prey. And then came that fateful moment when Buckingham Palace could no longer remain silent, when the reputation of the entire monarchy was at stake, when a decision was needed that could fundamentally alter the lives of an entire family. This decision, made in a time of crisis, was immediately felt by everyone, from the prince himself to his daughters, from his ex-wife to his grandchildren, who had not yet grasped the full depth of the changes that had occurred. The official statement issued by the palace was extremely dry and concise, just a few paragraphs of text, yet containing a drama capable of shaking anyone to their very core. It stated that Prince Andrew was relinquishing the use of all his royal titles and regalia. The reason was directly specified, without any hints or evasions. The ongoing allegations, which he himself denied, were distracting the royal family from fulfilling its most important duties to the nation. This short statement, consisting of only a few lines, in reality, signified the collapse of an entire world. A world in which the prince was a prince, in which his daughters could count on the status, protection, and comprehensive support due to members of the royal family, in which their future seemed clear and certain. This fateful moment changed absolutely everything. It is from this pivotal moment that the narrative begins, detailing how two princesses, accustomed to universal attention and honor, unexpectedly found themselves in a situation where their presence at social gatherings became undesirable. Their names, which had recently sounded proud and honorable, now became inconvenient. A single scandal not only destroyed their father's career and reputation, but also fundamentally reshaped the destinies of everyone who bore a surname connected to the Duke of York. The beginning of the fall was not sudden. It accumulated gradually, like mounting pressure before an inevitable volcanic eruption. But when the explosion finally occurred, it was so powerful and destructive that it forever altered the landscape of the British monarchy. Prince Andrew was born in 1960, the second son of Queen Elizabeth. His birth was perceived as a joyful and long-awaited event within the royal family. He was the first child born to a reigning queen in over 100 years. His childhood was spent within the luxurious interiors of Buckingham Palace, yet he was subjected to the strict discipline demanded by the Queen Mother. The prince received his education at prestigious boarding schools, underwent rigorous military training, and subsequently served in the Navy. The Falklands War of 1982 transformed him into a national hero. As a helicopter pilot, he participated in real combat operations. The press of the time lauded his extraordinary bravery. The public was proud of a prince who did not hide behind palace walls, but risked his own life alongside ordinary soldiers. Upon returning from the war, he basked in the glow of national acclaim. 4 years after this event, his wedding to Sarah Ferguson became a true national celebration, encompassing the entire country. Red-haired, radiant with cheerfulness and openness, Sarah instantly won the hearts of the public, becoming a universal favorite. This couple seemed the embodiment of an ideal: young, exceptionally beautiful, and genuinely happy. The birth of Beatrice brought even more light and joy into their lives. The little princess, with her enormous, expressive eyes, quickly became a true star of numerous photographs. 2 years later, Eugenie was born, and it seemed that the family was complete, harmonious, and truly exemplary. However, royal life is rarely as cloudless as it appears to an outside observer. The prince's frequent official trips, the relentless pressure of protocol, and the constant, intrusive media attention, scrutinizing every misstep or awkwardness, all took their toll. Sarah, raised in conditions of relative freedom and informality, felt stifled in the gilded cage of palace rules and restrictions. The marriage began to show cracks, and in 1992, a divorce was announced, a scandalous, widely discussed event, yet surprisingly amicable to everyone's astonishment. The prince and his ex-wife managed to maintain a friendly relationship, continued to live nearby, and co-parented their daughters. The press wondered how one could divorce and yet remain such close individuals. But for Andrew and Sarah, this approach proved perfectly workable. Their daughters grew up under the watchful eye of both parents. Beatrice received her education at the best institutions. She then went on to university, where she continued her studies. Eugenie, on the other hand, chose a path in the arts, successfully graduating from a prestigious college. Both princesses found work, started their own families, and became mothers. Life flowed in its natural course. Paparazzi continued to relentlessly follow their every move, but this had long become a familiar norm for those connected to the royal household. Meanwhile, Prince Andrew continued to fulfill his representative duties. For many decades, he served as a UK trade envoy, actively traveling the world, meeting with prominent businessmen and influential politicians, and promoting British interests abroad. This work required extensive connections, numerous contacts, and acquaintances with influential people from various countries. One such acquaintance, unfortunately, proved to be fateful. The name that would subsequently appear in every article dedicated to the prince was Jeffrey Epstein. This American financier, a billionaire with extensive connections in business and political circles, became a close friend of his. Their friendship lasted for many years. The prince regularly visited Epstein's luxurious homes, flew on his private jet, and attended exclusive events where the rich and famous gathered. At the time, it seemed perfectly normal. A member of the royal family socializing with influential people. Nothing unusual, no warning bells sounded. The friendship continued. Joint photographs appeared in the press, but no one saw any problem until the first domino fell, initiating a chain of irreversible events. In 2008, the public was left reeling when Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of charges that sparked deep outrage and shock. The details that emerged during the meticulous investigation were truly horrifying. Despite such a serious verdict, Prince Andrew did not sever ties with his convicted friend. Their meetings continued, seemingly ignoring public condemnation. In 2010, the pair was photographed together in New York. The prince was calmly strolling through Central Park in the company of a man whose guilt had already been proven in court. This compromising photograph became the spark that ignited a chain reaction, foreshadowing the inevitable end of his public reputation. Questions, like an avalanche, descended upon the royal family. How could a high-ranking member of the monarchy continue to associate with a figure embroiled in such repugnant crimes? What truly bound these two men together? Was the prince aware of the dark side of his friend's life, or was he kept in the dark? Buckingham Palace attempted to diffuse the growing tension. Official statements were carefully worded and deliberately vague. The prince expressed his deep regret for maintaining the friendship, insisting that he was unaware of the true circumstances of the case. He also emphasized that his meetings with Epstein were purely business-related, devoid of any personal connection. However, these explanations failed to satisfy a public hungry for the truth. The press, not content with official narratives, continued its investigations, delving into the most hidden corners of the story. Then, one by one, witnesses began to emerge from the shadows, breaking their silence. Shocking accusations surfaced, directed now specifically against the prince himself. A woman named Virginia Giuffre publicly claimed she was forced into sexual relations with the Duke of York when she was barely 17 years old. She alleged these incidents occurred at Epstein's luxurious homes and provided a photograph as proof, showing the young girl standing beside the prince, who had his arm around her waist. The media frenzy was deafening and uncontrollable. Accusations of this magnitude and nature can irrevocably destroy any reputation, even the most impeccable. For a member of the royal family, it spiraled into an absolute catastrophe, threatening complete ruin. The prince vehemently denied all accusations against him. He claimed he had no recollection of meeting the woman and disputed the authenticity of the provided photograph. In his defense, he offered an alibi. On the very day Giuffre mentioned, he was allegedly at a children's pizza party, which would have precluded his presence at the specified location. Understanding the gravity of the situation, the palace enveloped the prince in a dense protective ring of silence. Official comments rapidly diminished, but public and media pressure only steadily increased. Each new day brought fresh publications, revealing more and more details. Journalists meticulously dissected Andrew's entire biography, piece by piece. Old, long-forgotten photographs, fragments of interviews, and testimonies from people who had met the prince at various public and private events resurfaced, creating an increasingly comprehensive and unsettling picture. In 2019, the prince took a significant step, which was supposedly intended to reassure the anxious public. He agreed to an interview with BBC Newsnight. This conversation, lasting almost an hour, was his attempt to answer the most uncomfortable and pointed questions, explain the nature of his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, and vehemently deny all accusations leveled against him. The prince tried to appear as sincere and convincing as possible, hoping to restore trust. However, the effect of this public appearance was the exact opposite of expectations. The interview was met with crushing criticism from all sides, from ordinary viewers following the news to leading communications experts. The prince's explanations sounded extremely unconvincing and evasive, and his alibi raised bewilderment and suspicion. The complete lack of empathy for Epstein's victims caused particular outrage, shocking and alienating many. One controversial moment was particularly etched in the public's memory. The prince claimed he couldn't have been at a nightclub because, at the time, he suffered from an unusual medical condition, anhidrosis, or the inability to sweat, caused by stress experienced in war. This highly unusual defense sparked a wave of ridicule and indignation across the country. The interview, intended to salvage his tarnished reputation, ultimately dealt it a final blow, plunging him into a maelstrom of public condemnation. Within days of the catastrophic broadcast, Prince Andrew was forced to publicly announce his temporary withdrawal from all royal duties. What was initially positioned as a short-term pause gradually stretched into many months and then years, becoming the de facto end of his active public life as a member of the royal family. But, as it turned out, this was merely the prelude to far more serious trials and events. In August 2019, news spread worldwide of Jeffrey Epstein's death. He was found deceased in his prison cell while awaiting a new trial on serious charges. The official version of events indicated suicide. However, this tragic outcome not only failed to halt ongoing investigations, but, on the contrary, gave them a new, even more intense impetus. Virginia Giuffre, a key figure in the case, demonstrated unwavering resolve, steadfastly continuing to insist on her testimony and accusations. In 2021, she took a decisive step, filing a civil lawsuit against the prince in a U.S. court, seeking significant compensation for the damages she had suffered. In her lawsuit, she asserted that she continues to experience deep psychological suffering and trauma caused by events that occurred more than 2 decades prior. Under unprecedented pressure, the prince launched an active legal battle. His team of lawyers made every conceivable attempt to have the lawsuit dismissed, citing an agreement Giuffre had made with Epstein several years earlier. The lawyers insisted that the terms of this document protected all individuals who had connections with the deceased financier. However, the court did not accept the defense's arguments and denied the motion, thereby giving the green light for the case to proceed and gather further momentum. In public, Queen Elizabeth II maintained stoic silence regarding the unfolding scandal, but according to numerous rumors, she was privately deeply angered and profoundly dismayed by the situation. Her once-beloved son had become a constant and inexhaustible source of colossal problems and reputational risks for the entire British monarchy. The celebrations dedicated to her historic Jubilee reign were overshadowed by this unsightly scandal. Now, almost every mention of the royal family in the media was inevitably accompanied not only by photographs of Andrew, but also by detailed reports of the accusations against him, causing irreparable damage to the crown's image. The culmination of these accusations came in January 2022, when the royal court's patience finally ran out. It was then that the fateful announcement followed, forever changing the course of events. Prince Andrew was stripped of his military titles and all royal patronages, and he relinquished the honorary style of His Royal Highness. Formally, he retained the title of Duke of York, but he was effectively completely excluded from participating in the public life of the royal family. The text of this statement was extremely concise, but every word resonated like a crushing blow. The continuing accusations are distracting the royal family from its work, the official document stated. Between the lines, however, a clear and unambiguous message could be read. You have become a problem from which we are forced to distance ourselves. Just 1 month later, Prince Andrew reached an out-of-court settlement in the civil lawsuit. The exact amount of compensation was not disclosed, but according to press estimates, it amounted to at least £12 million. There was no admission of guilt or any apologies, merely a purely financial resolution to the conflict. Giuffre received monetary compensation and a public statement in which the prince expressed regret for his friendship with Epstein and sympathy for all victims. The case was officially closed, but its repercussions continued to ripple widely through public opinion. Prince Andrew's name instantly became toxic. Various organizations, one after another, began to withdraw his patronage. Events where he was previously invited as an honored guest stopped sending invitations. Even charitable foundations, with which he had collaborated for decades, began cautiously and discreetly to distance themselves. From a prince, he transformed into a true outcast. From a war hero to a persona non grata. But what happened to those who bore his surname, to those who called him Dad? What became of those whose lives were inextricably linked to his name and reputation? What became of his daughters? Beatrice was born on August 8, 1988, and Eugenie on March 23, 1990. The two sisters, separated by just 20 months, displayed completely different personalities from early childhood. Beatrice was more serious, responsible, the elder, always reliable. Eugenie, on the other hand, was more open, emotional, the younger one whom everyone sought to nurture and protect. They grew up in a very unique situation. On the one hand, they were princesses of royal blood, granddaughters of the reigning monarch, and on the other, daughters of parents whose marriage dissolved when they were very young. Beatrice was 4, and Eugenie barely 2 when the divorce was announced. However, unlike many children of divorced couples, they did not suffer from a rift between their parents. Their parents, Prince Andrew and Sarah, Duchess of York, developed a highly unconventional but effective model of family life. Despite the official dissolution of their marriage, they maintained a deep friendship, continuing to live on the same extensive estate, albeit in different parts. This unusual arrangement did not prevent them from celebrating all holidays together, traveling, and, most importantly, jointly raising their daughters. For the young princesses, this meant that despite their parents' legal divorce, their family home remained intact. Their father did not disappear from their daily lives, and their mother was not forced to become a lonely figure, constantly fighting for every opportunity to see her children. Their carefree, privileged childhood unfolded between the majestic Windsor Castle and the comfortable royal estate at Sunning Hill Park. The girls received an excellent education at the most prestigious private schools. They spent summers on holiday with their grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, in picturesque Balmoral, enjoyed traditional Christmas dinners within the walls of Buckingham Palace, participated in exciting summer regattas in Cowes, and invariably appeared on the steps of cathedrals during solemn royal weddings, captured in numerous photographs. Truly, it was a life that countless millions could only dream of. However, belonging to the royal family implies not only countless privileges, but also a significant price that must be paid daily, feeling the weight of public attention. Princesses. Beatrice and Eugenie realized this truth from a young age. Every public appearance, every carefully chosen outfit became the subject of intense media discussion. Any hairstyle, no matter how minor, immediately transformed into a full-fledged topic for newspaper and magazine articles, undergoing thorough analysis and criticism. This became particularly evident when Princess Beatrice appeared at the wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton wearing a rather eccentric hat. This accessory instantly triggered a storm of reactions, and the internet literally exploded with countless memes and parodies. Despite the wave of criticism and mockery, the young princess demonstrated remarkable composure and dignity, even deciding to auction off that very hat, which had become infamous for charity. However, this incident taught her an important lesson. Everything you do is seen by millions, and those millions are always ready to pass judgment on every, even the most insignificant detail. Despite their royal lineage, both princesses successfully pursued higher education. Princess Beatrice completed her studies at the prestigious Goldsmiths, University of London, earning a degree in the profound field of history of ideas. Her sister, Princess Eugenie, chose Newcastle University for her academic path, where she deeply studied English literature and history of art, demonstrating her intellectual interests. Notably, both sisters consciously decided to build their professional lives outside traditional royal structures, immersing themselves in the so-called ordinary world of work. Princess Beatrice found her calling in the dynamically developing fields of finance and technology, demonstrating her business acumen and drive for innovation. Meanwhile, Princess Eugenie linked her career to art, working at a gallery where she actively organized exhibitions and worked with contemporary pieces. Their common aspiration was to convincingly prove that princesses could be much more than just decorative figures at solemn official events. They vividly demonstrated that they could work full-time, earn their own living, and successfully build their own careers without relying on taxpayer allowances and without hiding behind a prestigious but demanding royal title. As for the princesses' personal lives, they developed in their own time, gradually taking shape. Princess Beatrice was in a romantic relationship with a well-known businessman for several years. However, these relations never culminated in marriage. Her sister, Princess Eugenie, found her true love somewhat earlier. Her fateful meeting with Jack Brooksbank occurred in the picturesque and romantic setting of a ski resort located in Switzerland. Eugenie and Beatrice of York, princesses of the blood, daughters of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, both found their marital happiness. Eugenie, the younger sister, married Jack Brooksbank, a brand manager whose ancestors held a baronetcy. Their fateful meeting took place at a ski resort in Switzerland. Their wedding in October 2018 rightly became one of the most discussed events of the year. The ceremony took place in the majestic St. George's Chapel, located within Windsor Castle, in the presence of hundreds of distinguished guests. This solemn event was broadcast nationwide, captivating millions of viewers. The bride appeared before the public in an exquisite gown created by British designers, her look complemented by a bouquet composed of autumn flowers. Beside her sat her happy parents, their faces beaming with joy, despite their long-ago divorce not preventing them from sharing this important moment. Beatrice, the elder princess, tied the knot later in the summer of 2020, and her wedding was significantly more modest than originally anticipated. The global pandemic made its tangible adjustments to the plans. Instead of a lavish ceremony, a quiet celebration took place within a close family circle with only 20 people in attendance. The bride chose a vintage dress graciously lent by her grandmother, the Queen, and complemented her outfit with a tiara that Elizabeth herself had worn at her own wedding 73 years prior. This became a profound symbol of generational continuity, an unspoken blessing from the family matriarch. Both sisters subsequently experienced the joy of motherhood, becoming devoted mothers. Eugenie, incidentally, gave birth to 2 children. Their lives, it seemed, were quite settled, stable, and filled with happiness. They regularly appeared at royal events when protocol required, actively supported various charitable organizations, successfully worked in their professional fields, and raised their children. It seemed they had found that balance between the public duties imposed on members of the royal family and their personal, private lives. However, throughout this time, their father, Prince Andrew, was invariably by their side, and despite all the scandals surrounding him, he remained their beloved dad. He was the one who held their hands at their first official events, was proud of every one of their achievements, walked them down the aisle on their wedding day, and happily played with his grandchildren. To them, he was not the figure splashed across newspaper headlines. He was a close and dear person. When the first press reports regarding their father's potential connection to Jeffrey Epstein emerged, the sisters chose silence. They offered no comments, gave no interviews, and kept their distance from the ensuing media storm. This strategy proved quite sensible. The fewer words spoken, the fewer opportunities for their meaning to be distorted. But this silence by no means indicated indifference. They saw with their own eyes how their father's life crumbled, how invitations to events he had attended for decades disappeared, how former friends and colleagues stopped returning his calls. The press, in turn, turned his every move into an occasion for another scandalous story. They watched as even their own mother was forced to publicly distance herself from him, though, according to rumors, she continued to offer her son support behind closed doors. The interview given by the prince to the BBC channel proved to be an unmitigated disaster, and not just for him. Princesses. Beatrice and Eugenie watched the broadcast along with the entire country, sharing the widespread dismay. There is information indicating that it was Beatrice who strongly advised her father to agree to the interview, genuinely believing that a candid conversation would help dispel mounting rumors and restore his good name. However, her calculations proved to be mistaken. After the broadcast aired, a torrent of criticism descended upon the princess. The public wondered in disbelief, how could she suggest something like that? Didn't she foresee the consequences? But what exactly could she have done? It was about her father, a man who desperately needed support, who sincerely believed in his ability to explain his position, and who perhaps didn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation. A daughter sought to help, but alas, the outcome was precisely the opposite of her intentions. When Buckingham Palace published an official statement stripping the prince of his titles and military ranks, the blow inadvertently struck his daughters as well. Formally, this decision did not directly concern them. They retained their titles as princesses, not through their father, but through their grandmother, the monarch. Royal protocol clearly stated, grandchildren of the monarch through the male line have an undeniable right to the title of prince or princess. Since Andrew is the Queen's son, this meant his daughters remained princesses, regardless of their father's status. Buckingham Palace officially confirmed this position. Beatrice and Eugenie would not lose their titles and could continue to perform representative duties on behalf of the royal family at various events. Their position, therefore, did not change from a legal standpoint, but the reality proved to be far more complex than mere legal formulations. The titles remained, but their reputation, public perception, and the attitudes of organizations with whom they collaborated all began to shift rapidly and painfully. Their mother, Sarah Ferguson, lost her title as Duchess of York during her divorce 3 decades ago. Formally, this title was not being taken from her now, but the press repeatedly reminded the public she was the disgraced prince's former wife, and far from blameless herself. Financial scandals of the 90s, when she was caught attempting to sell access to her former husband for money, years of debt, dubious connections with wealthy individuals willing to fund her lifestyle in exchange for proximity to the royal family, all resurfaced. Journalists diligently delved into the past, unearthing old stories and presenting them as irrefutable proof. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. If the parents are like this, what can the daughters be? Undoubtedly, this was unfair. Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie were never implicated in any wrongdoing. On the contrary, their lives were a model of integrity and service. They worked diligently, built strong families, raised their children, and actively participated in numerous charitable projects. However, as is well known, public opinion sometimes demonstrates astonishing cruelty. It is not inclined to delve into the nuances of individual guilt or innocence. For the crowd, it is enough for a noble surname to be stained by scandal, and then the shadow of suspicion inevitably falls on all who bear that name. even if their conscience is clear. Soon, the first, subtle, yet highly telling signals began to emerge, foretelling impending changes. For instance, a respected charitable organization where Princess Beatrice had served for many years in the honorary role of patron suddenly announced a major restructuring of its internal processes. Following this announcement, the princess's name quietly disappeared from the list of its leading members. The official version, of course, spoke of mutual agreement between the parties, but for those who understood the unspoken rules of the royal court, it was evident. This was nothing less than a polite but firm request to step down from her position. Meanwhile, Princess Eugenie continued her professional activities at a prestigious gallery, where she held a responsible position. However, even here there were changes. Her name, which previously regularly featured in press releases announcing major and significant exhibitions, was now consistently omitted. No one fired her. She retained her job, but there was a clear effort not to feature her prominently, as if underscoring the undesirability of her public presence. Despite the gathering clouds, both sisters demonstrated remarkable composure, continuing to appear at official events, consistently offering smiles to photographers, and flawlessly carrying out all their assigned duties. However, those who had the privilege of knowing them intimately noted with bitterness the true impact was not so much on them personally, but on their entire family. To realize how their father was effectively sidelined from full royal life, to understand that their beloved grandmother was forced to make such difficult and momentous decisions, to feel the ominous shadow of the unfolding scandal fall upon them too, despite their absolute innocence, all of this became an unbearable burden. In response, the family chose to completely shield themselves from the intrusive outside world. No comments for the press, no candid interviews about their feelings and experiences. Their royal upbringing, steeped in centuries of tradition, demanded unwavering stoicism. Not to show weakness, not to compromise dignity with public complaints, and to maintain an impassive demeanor under any, even the most unfavorable, circumstances. But is it possible to maintain that impassive face, that impeccable mask of dignity, when doors that once opened with warmth and readiness now began to slam shut, one after another? When once abundant invitations to significant events ceased to arrive, and event organizers who had until recently insisted on your presence now hinted with deliberate politeness, perhaps it would be better to refrain from visiting this time? Their titles, of course, remained with them. Their legal status underwent no change, yet everyday reality transformed into an exhausting and constant tightrope walk. They formally continued to be princesses, but they clearly felt that in the eyes of many, they had already become unwanted guests, a burdensome liability, a living reminder of a scandal everyone so desperately sought to consign to oblivion. And it was against this backdrop of widespread alienation and unspoken ostracism that, like a ray of light in the gathering gloom, an unexpected invitation arrived. The Pink Ball, a grand event scheduled to take place within the majestic British Museum, and rightly considered the event of the year. The event of the year. The truly prestigious and dazzling event was approaching, where the presence of the princesses was not just desirable, but almost mandatory. Their names were already on the meticulously compiled list of honored guests. The organizers eagerly anticipated their arrival, and press representatives were already preparing their cameras, anticipating exclusive shots. However, for Beatrice and Eugenie, the question was not whether to attend, but whether their presence would be welcomed, or if it would turn into a cunning trap. If they appeared, they would immediately become the epicenter of unwelcome attention, facing an endless stream of questions about their father, the unfolding scandal, and how they were coping with the pressure. Declining to participate, however, would be perceived as a sign of weakness, an unconditional admission of defeat, and confirmation that the scandal had broken them. The princesses faced a truly tragic choice, where every path led to an inevitable loss. The idea that no major scandal leaves a family untouched was deeply ingrained in the public consciousness. For Beatrice and Eugenie, this bitter truth became a tangible reality, the moment their once impeccable surname ceased to be an undeniable privilege, but rather a source of constant doubt and suspicion. Organizations that had, until very recently, proudly emphasized their ties to royalty suddenly began to extremely cautiously re-evaluate their positions and long-standing partnerships. Some patrons whose names had been associated with Prince Andrew's family for many years slowly but surely receded into the background, gradually distancing themselves from former associations. Some decisively withdrew from already planned joint projects. Others preferred to stop mentioning the family name in their public statements altogether. And in some cases, support ceased entirely, vanishing into thin air. This isolation was almost imperceptible at first glance, but with each passing day, it became more palpable and painful. Despite the drastically complicated circumstances, the princesses sought to demonstrate that they had no intention of hiding within the confines of their homes. They continued to appear at public events, striving to maintain smiles on their faces and displaying the resilience and composure they had been taught since early childhood. This was their way to show the world they were not broken. Many watched their resolve with genuine interest, admiring how they steadfastly tried to maintain their connection with society, despite the torrent of challenges that had befallen them. Even as every new press publication could be another blow to their already fragile family reputation, pressure relentlessly mounted. Buckingham Palace, traditionally guarding centuries-old traditions and an unwavering silence, was slow to offer either open support or official denials, maintaining its characteristic detachment. Within the family itself, the atmosphere became strained to the breaking point. Every decision, even the most minor, whether to appear at an intimate charity dinner or decline an invitation to a large-scale public event, was discussed as a strategic move capable of influencing their standing. Prince Andrew remained aloof from these discussions, realizing that his forced relinquishment of titles had dealt an invisible yet devastating blow to his daughters, who now had to independently bear all the trials fate had prepared for them. And then came the moment, an unmistakable harbinger of impending changes. The grand society ball, dreamed of by dozens of European aristocrats and high society members, took place without their presence. Insider sources from their immediate circle strongly advised, it would be better to stay home, avoid unnecessary risks, so as not to provide new fodder for unwelcome headlines. Hello magazine, citing its sources, reported that the decision to withdraw from the event was made after thorough consultations with family members. And although, from a formal standpoint, the sisters could certainly have appeared in the luxurious halls, unofficially, they were persuaded to refrain. They remained in their residences, watching the news broadcasts, scrolling through messages and photographs, where instead of their smiles, the glitter of other, more fortunate guests shone, their reputations unmarred by scandal. Thus, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, for the first time, fully felt how the shadows of the past could mercilessly alter the present, and how the consequences of others' decisions transformed into their personal drama. Their absence was more than noticeable, and a quiet whisper swept through the majestic halls of the British Museum. Tonight, there are different faces at the ball. From this fateful moment, new chapters of their lives began to be written by entirely different rules. They were no longer just holders of royal titles. They were a living symbol. that even the most prominent titles cannot protect against relentless change, when a wave of major events engulfs not only the head of the family, but also his entire circle. The Pink Ball. The name sounded surprisingly light, almost casually playful, as if it referred to a carefree spring celebration for young ladies, and by no means a gravely serious social event capable of rivaling the world's most prestigious receptions. But behind this apparent lightness lay a grand ambition, entirely befitting the British crown, to create an event that could overshadow even the famous New York Met. Gala. This bold idea was far from accidental. For many decades, America confidently dictated the rules in the world of social balls. Every May, the whole world literally held its breath in anticipation. Who would appear on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum? What outfits would global stars choose? What theme would be central this year? London observed this from afar, and this constant observation gave rise to a logical question. Why couldn't Britain, with its centuries-old traditions, incomparable royal luxury, and impeccable taste, create something equally grand and memorable? The answer came in the form of the Pink Ball. The organizers chose a venue truly worthy of monarchs, the British Museum, a majestic building carefully safeguarding priceless treasures of civilizations, with halls where every exhibit is an integral part of world history. The atmosphere of this place was steeped in the grandeur of past centuries. If events aspiring to legendary status were to be held, it had to be here. The date for the ball was solemnly set. Exquisite invitations were dispatched across the country. The list of invited dignitaries was compiled over many months, representing a meticulously curated cross-section of the elite. Influential politicians whose decisions shaped the nation's trajectory. Powerful businessmen whose multi-billion-dollar fortunes wielded colossal influence over the economy. Dazzling stars of cinema and the music industry whose names resonated across all continents. And hereditary aristocrats whose lineages traced back to the depths of the Middle Ages. Each name on this list was the result of meticulous selection, and every invitation served as an undeniable testament to special recognition and high status. The overarching theme of the upcoming ball was inextricably linked to the museum's current exhibition, titled Ancient India, Living Traditions. This exhibition delved into the centuries-old culture of the Indian subcontinent, narrating its art, profound philosophy, and ancient traditions that had endured millennia, retaining their pristine power. The event organizers decided that invited guests should harmoniously embody this rich theme in their evening attire. For this, a special color was chosen, pink, which in Indian culture has long been a powerful symbol of joy, femininity, and the dawn of new life. The pink palette was exceptionally broad, from the softest, barely perceptible hue of dawn to the deep, saturated tone of a freshly bloomed lotus. It spanned the spectrum from powdery pink, almost indistinguishable from white, to dazzling fuchsia, literally captivating the eye with its vibrancy. The dress code was established with uncompromising strictness. Appearing at the evening in a non-pink outfit would be considered a clear sign of disrespect to the organizers and the very concept of the celebration. Leading designers began their work many weeks before the appointed date. Fashion ateliers operated non-stop, day and night, creating true masterpieces from noble silk, luxurious velvet, airy organza, and delicate lace. Some couturiers favored classic elegance, embodying it in long gowns with modestly covered shoulders, minimal embellishments, placing the main emphasis on the natural nobility and texture of the fabric. Others, conversely, dared bold experiments, offering asymmetrical designs, intriguingly open backs, cascades of voluminous ruffles, exotic feathers, shimmering glitter, and sparkling rhinestones. This truly grand evening was marked by an unusual carpet, not the traditional red, but an exquisite pink. The event organizers thoughtfully unrolled a carpet in a delicate, dusty rose hue along the entire path, stretching from the majestic entrance of the museum to the main exhibition halls. On both sides, numerous photographers lined up in dense rows, ready to capture every moment. From the very first seconds, the air was filled with the dazzling glow of countless flashes. Each arriving guest, seemingly aware of the importance of their appearance, paused before the camera lenses, allowing professionals to capture their carefully chosen outfit from all possible angles. Gradually, the spacious hall began to fill with an elegant crowd. Light, enchanting music drifted through the air, harmoniously blending with the incessant hum of lively conversations. Meanwhile, impeccably dressed waiters nimbly circulated, offering sparkling champagne in elegant flutes. Each table was adorned with magnificent arrangements of fresh flowers, lush peonies, fragrant roses, and exotic orchids, all in the most delicate shades of the chosen theme. The lighting in the halls was artfully designed to maximally accentuate the luxury and sparkle of each outfit. Soft, warm light caressed the eye without tiring it, yet was bright enough for perfect photographs. Guests happily greeted each other, exchanged genuine compliments on their ensembles, and animatedly discussed the details of their attire. Some arrived accompanied by their spouses, while others preferred the company of close friends. The atmosphere of the evening was filled with sparkling merriment, benevolent smiles, and a subtle anticipation characteristic of such high-ranking events. All present undoubtedly understood this celebration was destined to earn its place in the annals of social chronicles. Images from this grand event would, without a doubt, circulate to every corner of the globe. The very next morning, the pages of leading glossy magazines would be filled with extensive reports devoted exclusively to it. Fashion critics and social commentators would passionately scrutinize every ensemble, delivering their verdicts, highlighting the most successful looks, and mercilessly criticizing any missteps. However, amidst all this splendor and glitter, those whose presence could have lent the event true royal grandeur were absent: Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. Their names certainly were on the guest list. The organizers genuinely hoped that the two august granddaughters of the late Queen would, by their appearance, add a special flair to this celebratory evening. The press, for its part, had already prepared exclusive material, posing questions. What would the princesses wear? What jewelry would they choose? With whom would they arrive? The seats, thoughtfully reserved for them, remained silently empty. For the first hour, this circumstance caused only mild bewilderment. Guests assumed the royal figures might simply be running late. After all, London traffic is known to cause unpleasant surprises, even for those of noble birth. But the first hour subtly blended into the second, and then the third. The celebration gained momentum, but the anticipated princesses never appeared. A subtle whisper began to filter through the general buzz, rapidly, gaining strength and spreading through the halls. Why weren't they here? What happened? Chiel. Some guests were inclined to attribute it to illness, while others, recalling recent royal family upheavals, drew deeper conclusions. For those who closely followed the latest palace news, it became clear. This absence had nothing to do with ordinary traffic jams or a minor cold. Later, a reputable publication specializing in British aristocracy coverage would reveal shocking details. It emerged from revelations by a source very close to the royal family that the royal sisters had been very politely but firmly advised to refrain from attending the celebration and to remain in their residences. They were not officially forbidden, and their invitation was not rescinded, but they were clearly made to understand that their presence at the ball risked provoking numerous undesirable questions, creating an extremely awkward atmosphere, and most importantly, diverting public attention from the grand event itself, shifting it instead to the ongoing scandal directly involving their royal father. This recommendation, cloaked in such gentle, almost friendly terms, concealed a harsh, unpalatable truth. The royal princesses had, from that point on, become unwelcome at high-ranking social events. Their appearance, once considered an undisputed asset and an honor for any host, now represented a liability, a potential risk, and a source of headache for event organizers, rather than an embellishment. Princesses. Beatrice and Eugenie, undoubtedly aware of the gravity of the situation, made the only possible decision for themselves, to remain within their residences. What emotions filled their hearts on that momentous evening? Was it burning resentment, righteous anger, or bitter resignation to the inevitable? Or perhaps relief that they wouldn't have to feign carefree joy, offer strained smiles under the relentless gaze of cameras, and answer carefully veiled, yet still stinging questions? Or perhaps it was deep bitterness from realizing how radically and irrevocably their lives had changed in recent months. They likely secluded themselves in the quiet of their homes, perhaps browsing the first photos from the celebration online, observing the exquisite museum halls that should have been graced by their royal presence, the genuine smiles of guests they could have warmly greeted, and the lavish outfits they could have discussed. This evening, which could have been a source of pleasant memories, instead became a sad symbol of their new, altered reality. Meanwhile, in the grand halls of the museum, entirely different figures shone with their presence. These were individuals whose names were untarnished by public scandals and disgraceful revelations. Those who could smile openly and unconcernedly at the lenses of numerous cameras, without fear of tricky questions or unpleasant provocations. Those who didn't need to repeatedly prove their undeniable right to be at this exquisite social gathering. And among these esteemed guests, particular attention from the public and press was drawn to three young women, three sisters, whose well-known surname was also closely linked to the royal family, but through a completely different, much nobler connection. Not through a disgraced prince, but through a princess who had become a true legend in her lifetime. Through a woman whose tragic fate forever altered the perception of the monarchy in the eyes of millions. It was through Princess Diana that the Spencer sisters arrived at this ball and gracefully took the central place in public attention that once rightfully belonged to the daughters of the Duke of York. The name Spencer in Great Britain is always spoken with a special, profound weight. This ancient aristocratic lineage, whose history traces its roots back to the venerable depths of the 10th century, represents one of the pillars of British nobility. For centuries, the Earl Spencer owned vast estates. Their representatives held important political positions, significantly influencing the country's destiny, and their military members bravely fought for the crown. The family always remained in close proximity to the monarchy, yet stayed outside of it, never merging with the royal dynasty, until one of the family's daughters became the Princess of Wales. Diana Spencer, a name that in itself became a symbol, requiring no introduction. A young woman from an ancient aristocratic family, destined to marry the heir to the throne. A woman whose wedding ceremony gathered an unprecedented 750 million viewers worldwide before television screens, becoming one of the largest events in television history. Mother of future kings, a recognized style icon, the embodiment of a new, more accessible and humane monarchy, and ultimately a tragic victim of the very complex and relentless system she unwittingly became a part of. Her sudden and tragic passing in 1997 shook the entire globe to its core. The grief was truly universal, encompassing people on every continent. Flowers piled up in mountains at the gates of Kensington Palace, forming a living carpet of sorrow and love. Millions of grieving citizens wept before their televisions, watching the broadcast of the funeral procession, which became a symbol of bidding farewell to an entire era. Diana forever became a legend, the people's princess, as she was affectionately called during her lifetime, and this honorary title remained with her forever. But Diana also had her own family, brothers, sisters, and, of course, nieces, who grew up cherishing the memory of their beloved aunt, who passed away when these young ones were still very small. These were the daughters of her younger brother, Earl Charles Spencer, Lady Kitty, Lady Eliza, and Lady Amelia. 3 young women bearing a surname forever linked to one of the 20th century's most famous and influential women. Although formally they did not possess royal blood, remaining aristocrats by birth, daughters of an earl, it was this unbreakable connection to Diana that made them special in the eyes of the wider public. Nieces of a legend, continuers of a lineage that gave the world a princess who radically changed the face of the monarchy. And it was this unique connection that opened doors to high society for them, doors that remained inaccessible to the vast majority of others. Many eyes, undoubtedly, were fixed upon them. Lady Kitty, the eldest of the Spencer sisters, was born in 1991. She has long established herself as a successful model, a prominent socialite, and a recognizable face for many major brands. Her photos regularly grace the covers of reputable glossy magazines, and her style is consistently recognized as impeccable. Her inherent elegance leaves no room for doubt. In her appearance, many detect striking features of Princess Diana. The same expressive eyes, the same captivating smile, and, most importantly, the same astonishing ability to look like a true queen, despite lacking an official royal title. Following Kitty are Lady Eliza and Lady Amelia, twins, born in 1992. Both young women have also chosen careers in the modeling world, actively collaborating with leading fashion houses. Their appearances on Fashion Week runways in global capitals, as well as their photographs for iconic fashion publications, make their faces instantly recognizable and their style a subject of lively discussion. The press consistently highlights their kinship with Princess Diana, reminding the public of her legacy. The Spencer sisters divide their lives between Great Britain and South Africa, where a significant portion of their childhood was spent. They received prestigious educations at top institutions and move in circles of high aristocracy and international elite. Their existence is a continuous succession of brilliant social gatherings, exquisite fashion shows, significant charity events, and captivating travels around the world. However, despite all this outward splendor, they never forget their famous aunt. In numerous interviews, they often and warmly recall Diana, speaking of her boundless kindness, astonishing generosity, and how profoundly she changed the world around her. They proudly wear jewelry once belonging to the princess, actively attend events held in her honor, and provide comprehensive support to charitable organizations she founded or championed during her lifetime. And so came the long-awaited evening of the Pink Ball, an event to which only the chosen few, the cream of society, were invited. The Spencer sisters, of course, received an invitation and accepted it without the slightest hesitation. For them, this was not just another social outing, but a magnificent chance to shine again, showcase themselves in all their glory, and remind the world that the Spencer name still holds an important place in British society, maintaining its weight and influence. They prepared for this appearance with particular care. The ball's theme was clearly defined, a dominant pink color and a subtle connection to ancient India. The task was not merely to appear in a pink dress, but to create a cohesive look that would undeniably be remembered, actively discussed by all fashion commentators the next day, and perhaps even become a new benchmark of elegance and impeccable taste. Designers worked with each sister individually, meticulously considering the peculiarities of their figure, personal style, and character. They faced a highly ambitious goal. The three sisters had to look absolutely harmonious together, yet each had to retain her uniqueness. It was important not to copy each other, nor to fall into stylistic contradiction, but to create a true triumvirate of beauty and exquisite taste. The moment elegant cars smoothly pulled up to the grand entrance of the British Museum, the numerous camera flashes, which had until then only occasionally illuminated the evening darkness, instantly intensified, transforming into a cascade of bright lights. One after another, with grace and dignity, the three famous sisters emerged from the cars. Guests and press representatives present that evening seemed to freeze for a moment, gripped by anticipation. Their appearance was, undoubtedly, a spectacle worthy of royalty, majestic and unforgettable. Lady Amelia was the first of the sisters to appear before the public. Her outfit immediately captured everyone's attention, becoming the focal point. It featured an asymmetrical, quite daring and unconventional cut, crafted from a rich, bright pink fabric, generously embroidered with large, lush red roses. The floral pattern was so skillfully executed and expressive that it gave the complete impression of real, fragrant buds blossoming directly on the dress's material. One sleeve, fashioned as an elegant puff, added a touch of romantic tenderness to the overall look, while a substantial bow at the waist elevated the outfit to a true work of high art. However, the splendor of the look was not limited to the dress alone. Carefully selected jewelry harmoniously complemented the ensemble, giving it a truly regal, majestic appearance. A luxurious necklace, encrusted with diamonds and rubies, rested on her neck, sparkling mesmerizingly as it caught the light with every slight movement. Elegant and incredibly expensive teardrop earrings softly framed her face, accentuating its features. Her hair was artfully styled to highlight the jewels, without detracting from the overall magnificence of the dress. The result was a look full of drama, deeply memorable, and radiating unparalleled vibrancy. Immediately following her was Lady Eliza, her twin sister, whose appearance also elicited admiring gasps. And while their faces bore a striking resemblance, their styles differed dramatically. She opted for a form-fitting evening gown with a halter neck, an undisputed classic of impeccable elegance. Its fabric, exquisitely embroidered with thousands of delicate pink sequins, shimmered and sparkled softly with every step she took, creating a captivating effect of gentle luminescence. The gown fit her flawlessly, delicately highlighting the graceful lines of her figure, while maintaining impeccable sophistication and refinement. Her choice of jewelry was made with no less, if not greater, care and attention to detail. A diamond necklace shimmered on her neck, more delicate and subtle in its design than her sister's, but no less precious and expensive. Elegant earrings sparkled dazzlingly, reflecting light with every slight turn of her head. And a bracelet, adorned with a scattering of precious stones, gracefully encircled her wrist. All these elements together created a look worthy of a brilliant Hollywood diva from the golden age of cinema. Sophisticated, radiant, and absolutely irresistible. And finally, the moment arrived for Lady Kitty, the eldest of the sisters, the most famous and recognizable, whose appearance the public awaited with particular impatience, anticipating the true culmination of the evening. And, it must be said, her appearance did not disappoint even the boldest expectations. Her choice was a dress crafted in the style of the iconic Barbie doll, which in itself was a rather bold and unexpected decision for such a formal event. The rich and incredibly vibrant pink hue of the fabric immediately drew attention. The cut, truly reminiscent of the famous doll's legendary outfits, was at once voluminous, distinctly feminine, a little playful, yet undoubtedly luxurious and refined. Over the main dress, an impressive cape made of weightless ostrich feathers was draped. This light and airy garment added extra volume and a touch of unique drama to the overall look. With every movement, the feathers gently swayed, creating an ethereal, weightless cloud around the wearer, enveloping her in a mysterious aura. This was not just an outfit. It was an entire theatrical performance staged on the runway of a social evening. However, the true highlight that captivated gazes was not traditional diamonds, but something far more organic and vibrant. This time, Kitty opted for natural beauty, adorning herself with arrangements of fresh flowers, artfully. Arranged buds in pink and lilac hues, carefully secured, created an atmosphere of a magical fairy tale around her. Flowers were woven into her hair, embraced her wrists, becoming an integral part of the dress itself. The entire look was truly fantastical, almost unreal in its airiness and sophistication. Precisely this effect was needed for an evening originally conceived as a worthy competitor to the legendary Met Gala. The three sisters appeared before the public together, each in her unique yet harmoniously themed ensemble. These three women brilliantly demonstrated that true aristocracy has by no means lost its keen sense of style and innate taste. The Spencer name, undoubtedly, still resonates loudly and significantly in high society. Princess Diana's nieces proved that they can shine just as brightly, and sometimes even more brilliantly, than members of the royal family themselves. Photographers' cameras clicked like machine guns, capturing every step and gesture. Journalists vied to shout questions, eager to catch even one comment. Guests, mesmerized by their appearance, turned to watch the sisters with admiring glances. The Spencer sisters moved through the hall with the unwavering confidence bestowed by impeccable upbringing and a deep awareness of their own importance. They knew perfectly well, tomorrow their photos would grace the front pages of all leading publications. Their outfits would be analyzed in minute detail, and they themselves would be hailed as the undisputed stars of the evening. And this proved to be absolutely true. In the absence of Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, it was the Spencer sisters who managed to take center stage under the spotlights. They became the ones talked about, actively discussed, and who, in essence, determined the undeniable success of the entire pink ball. The symbolism of the situation did not escape the keen attention of the omnipresent press. Prince Andrew's daughters, closely linked by blood to the reigning dynasty, found themselves in the shadows that evening simply by being absent. At the very same time, the nieces of a woman who had once left the royal family through divorce and then tragically departed this world shone in all their splendor. It turned out that some princesses chose to withdraw into the shadows, while others, without formal titles, effortlessly took their place under the bright spotlights. History, it seemed, was repeating itself in a very strange and even mystical way. Diana once overshadowed everyone around her with her presence, eliciting both jealousy and immense admiration. Now her nieces were doing the same, albeit entirely unintentionally, simply because they appeared where others, for various reasons, could not or were not desired. The pink ball continued, filled with music, dancing, and sparkling champagne flowing freely. Photographers tirelessly captured every vibrant moment of the celebration, while somewhere far from this glamour and bustle, two princesses of royal blood sat in their homes, perhaps with a profound understanding that the world had changed, and their place in this new world was no longer guaranteed solely by a title given at birth. Fashion, as is well known, represents a silent language capable of telling a whole story, reflecting the essence of character and making a statement to the world. And on this very evening within the walls of the British Museum, the Spencer sisters demonstrated impeccable mastery of this language. Every minute detail of their ensembles was meticulously thought out. Every element carried deep meaning. Together they created a true symphony in shades of pink, which was forever etched into the annals of social chronicles. Lady Amelia, in turn, chose a path of maximalism. Her dress didn't just meet the prescribed dress code. It exceeded all imaginable expectations. An asymmetrical cut is, in itself, a bold decision. In the world of high fashion, symmetry is traditionally perceived as a safe and predictable choice, whereas asymmetry demands considerable confidence. One must possess a deep understanding that the figure can carry such a style, that one exposed shoulder will not disrupt the overall harmony of the look, but rather emphasize its uniqueness. A highly unusual fabric was chosen for the dress. Not the customary smooth silk or shimmering satin, but a bright pink material with a dense texture, upon which enormous red roses blossomed. The design was so realistic that it gave the complete impression that these were not skillful embroidery or print, but real, living flowers, somehow magically frozen on the fabric. Large buds, in a deep, dark red, almost burgundy hue, contrasted strikingly with the pink background, creating both a dramatic and celebratory effect. A single puff sleeve added a touch of romanticism to the look. This exquisite detail was a nod to 15th-century fashion, when women's dresses truly resembled works of art. The voluminous sleeve masterfully balanced the asymmetry of the top of the gown, creating an intriguing play of proportions and making the look unforgettable. However, the true highlight was the bow at the waist, massive and tied with effortless elegance. It didn't just accentuate the graceful waistline. It became the central element of the entire composition, a point to which the eye was involuntarily drawn. The ribbon of the bow gracefully flowed down the skirt, giving movement to the otherwise static dress. With every step, the ends of the bow gently swayed, creating the impression of a living, breathing garment. The jewelry was chosen with meticulous precision. The necklace itself was a work of art. Diamonds, cut to catch every ray of light, and rubies, dark red, almost black at the center, yet burning with fire at the edges. The stones were arranged in an intricate pattern, reminiscent of the finest lace. The necklace elegantly hugged the neck without feeling constricting, resting naturally as if it had been created specifically for its wearer. Drop earrings harmoniously complemented the look. Long and delicate, they framed the face, drawing attention to its features. With every turn of the head, the earrings gently swayed, sparkling under the chandeliers. The diamonds and rubies echoed the necklace's composition, creating perfect harmony. This was a set worn by queens, or by those who feel like queens, even without a crown. Her Majesty, Lady Amelia, meticulously planned every aspect of her appearance, down to the hairstyle, which was designed to perfectly complement the splendor of her crown without competing with it, yet without being lost amidst the glittering jewels. Her hair was artfully swept into an elegant updo, exuding regal grace. Several delicate curls were gently released to frame her face, softly enhancing her features and lending the look a tender, yet refined severity. Her makeup, applied with impeccable taste, was restrained yet expressive. The main focus was on her eyes, which appeared even deeper and more alluring, while her lips were subtly enhanced with a delicate pink hue, perfectly matching the overall theme of the formal evening. From the tips of her meticulously styled hair to the very edge of her flowing hem, Amelia's ensemble was a perfect work of art, dramatic, luxurious, and truly unforgettable. However, her twin sister, Lady Eliza, chose a radically different approach to her evening look. While Amelia appeared as a Baroque princess, Eliza underwent a striking transformation, embodying the ideal of a Golden Age Hollywood diva. Her gown was a true embodiment of classic elegance. Its figure-hugging silhouette flawlessly accentuated every curve of her slender figure, creating a harmonious and sophisticated look worthy of the red carpet. A particular highlight of the ensemble was the American neckline, an exquisite cut that delicately exposed her shoulders while maintaining the impeccable elegance characteristic of high fashion. The fabric of the dress itself possessed a truly mesmerizing effect. It was embroidered with delicate pink sequins, each no larger than a pinky fingernail. These miniature sparkles were placed so densely that they created a continuous, shimmering surface, resembling liquid metal. With every movement Lady Eliza made, the dress seemed to come alive, displaying an astonishing play of light. The sequins caught the rays from all possible angles, and in one moment the gown appeared almost pure white, while in the next it transformed into a rich, deep, and alluring shade of pink. With just a slight turn, the dress would ripple and shimmer in every conceivable shade, from delicate powder pink to vibrant salmon. This effect was truly hypnotic. It seemed impossible to tear one's gaze away from this radiant spectacle. It created the impression that the gown glowed from within, emitting a soft yet captivating light. Every step she took became a small but impressive show, drawing the attention of everyone around her. Eliza moved with extraordinary fluidity and confidence, perfectly aware that her magnificent dress not only adorned her, but also actively contributed to creating an unforgettable impression. She didn't need to make excessive movements, wave her arms, or strike elaborate, contrived poses. Merely walking was enough, and the dress itself did all the work, continuously attracting admiring glances. The design of this gown was characterized by a simplicity that bordered on genius. It lacked any ruffles, elaborate bows, or other superfluous decorative elements, just a clean, flawless silhouette, flowing to the floor, and a slight train at the back. That lent the entire look additional solemnity and majesty. It was a dress created for a true lady, a woman so confident in herself and her natural beauty that she had no need for any additional embellishments or distracting details. Lady Eliza's true beauty lay precisely in this apparent simplicity and the impeccable quality of every detail of her appearance. Her jewelry was chosen with the same philosophy of minimalism and sophistication. Her neck was adorned with a diamond necklace that appeared significantly thinner and more delicate than her sister's jewel. It was an example of classic jewelry design, a thin white gold chain featuring an elegant pendant at its center. The focal point was a large, brilliant diamond, surrounded by a delicate scattering of smaller stones that merely emphasized its splendor without drawing undue attention. The simplicity of its form strikingly highlighted the true expense and nobility of the materials used. It was not just an ornament, but a genuine piece of jewelry art, worthy of the highest position, such as Queen Elizabeth at an official reception. The earrings were carefully chosen in the same exquisite style, not too long to distract, and not too massive to overwhelm the look. Classic cut diamonds, sparkling with extraordinary clarity and brilliant luster, elegantly framed her face without creating any excessive busyness. A bracelet, gracefully encircling her wrist, harmoniously completed the entire ensemble. Wide and generously encrusted with precious stones, it added a touch of true luxury, but did so with dignity, not loudly proclaiming its magnificence. Eliza's hairstyle was characterized by greater freedom and casualness compared to Amelia's updo. Her hair fell in soft waves to her shoulders, with a few strands skillfully pinned back to delicately expose her neck, allowing the full beauty of the necklace to be showcased. Her makeup, in the style of old Hollywood, with classic winged eyeliner and sensual red lips, lent her look a timeless elegance. Such an outfit could undoubtedly have been worn by Grace Kelly or Audrey Hepburn in their most iconic years. And finally, Lady Kitty, the eldest sister, the most renowned among them, the one on whom the greatest hopes and expectations were placed. And to everyone's astonishment, she surpassed them all. Her appearance elicited genuine gasps and enthusiastic exclamations even from the most seasoned and world-weary social commentators. A dress styled after Barbie initially sounded like a rather risky endeavor. It could have seemed too playful and frivolous for such a formal and significant event, too much like a costume for a themed party. However, Kitty, thanks to her impeccable taste, transformed this risk into a true triumph. The dress was pink, but its shade was far from childish innocence. A rich fuchsia, deep and opulent, lent it nobility. The style resembled the iconic outfits of the famous doll, a fitted bodice that effectively accentuated her figure, and a voluminous skirt that created a perfect hourglass silhouette. But the quality of craftsmanship was so exceptionally high that any association with a toy instantly vanished upon closer inspection. The fabric shimmered exquisitely under the spotlights, playing with various shades. Numerous layers of weightless tulle created impressive volume without any heaviness. The skirt was light and airy, yet perfectly maintained its intended shape. With the slightest movement it billowed, creating a captivating cloud-like effect. Kitty seemed like a fairy, stepping on earth with unearthly grace, yet ready to take flight at any second. Over the dress, an elegant cape made of ostrich feathers was draped. This was a truly bold and unconventional design choice. Ostrich feathers are a very capricious and demanding material. They can look incredibly luxurious, or, if poorly executed, turn a woman into a caricature. Everything depends solely on the quality of the material itself and the masterful skill of the execution. Kitty's cape was flawlessly made, demonstrating the highest class. The feathers, dyed to precisely match the dress, appeared weightless and airy, swaying gracefully with the slightest movement. The cape, resting loosely on her shoulders, did not restrict her in the least, granting its wearer complete freedom. It could be gracefully draped over her arms, creating the deceptive impression of unfurled wings, or thrown back, fully revealing the splendor of the dress. Thus, every gesture Kitty made became part of a meticulously planned performance, captivating all eyes. However, the true culmination of this look was the live flowers. This time, Kitty consciously eschewed the traditional sparkle of precious stones. Instead of glittering diamonds and deep emeralds, she opted for delicate natural beauty. The floral arrangements were created especially for her by a skilled florist, whose name was well known in leading fashion houses. He selected pink and lilac buds so that their hues perfectly harmonized with the palette of the dress and feathers, creating a unified, cohesive picture. These delicate flowers were artfully woven into her hair, forming a semblance of a very light wreath, completely weightless and not massive, as if the buds had simply bloomed directly in her hairstyle. A refined bracelet, also composed of these same flowers, graced Kitty's wrist, successfully replacing traditional jewelry. Several buds were also attached to the dress itself, creating an illusion of randomness, as if they had just fallen and become lost on the luxurious fabric, adding even more charm to the ensemble. As a result, the look was truly fairy tale-like and magical. Kitty appeared not just as a guest at the ball, but its undisputed queen. Not a princess awaiting rescue, but a powerful sorceress capable of working wonders around her with her mere presence. Photographers, mesmerized by her splendor, could not get enough shots. Every angle was flattering, every pose perfect, capturing her unique charm. Thus, the three sisters showcased three completely different approaches to the same theme of a formal evening. Amelia embodied the drama and luxury of the Baroque. Eliza shone with classic Hollywood elegance, while Kitty presented a true fairy tale fantasy, masterfully balancing on the fine line of reality. Together, they created a cohesive picture that was discussed not only on that memorable night, but for many weeks afterward. Fashion magazines dedicated entire articles to their outfits. Designers meticulously analyzed every minute detail, and bloggers dissected the looks, element by element, seeking to understand their magic. Ordinary people, inspired by what they saw, tried to replicate at least the makeup or hairstyle. The Spencer sisters, without exaggeration, became style icons overnight. And somewhere far from this dazzling glitter, two royal princesses sadly looked at the photographs. They saw the spacious museum halls filled with laughing guests, the luxurious outfits they could have discussed if they had been there, the smiles they could have shared. They saw an evening that, by rights, should have been their triumph, but which, ironically, turned into someone else's celebration. The Pink Ball, that grand celebration, concluded its brilliant course only with the first rays of dawn. Guests, tired from dancing and socializing, gradually departed for their residences. Photographers carefully packed their expensive equipment, and organizers were already beginning to dismantle the decorations in the lavish halls. However, the true consequences of this spectacular evening were only just beginning to manifest. If for the Spencer sisters this event turned into a genuine triumph, for the princesses of York it served as a harsh reminder of a new, rather disheartening reality, in which even the most resounding and ancient titles could no longer guarantee them a deserving place under the bright spotlight. The morning after the Pink Ball brought exactly what was predicted: an avalanche of media publications. Fresh newspaper issues emblazoned the Spencer sisters' large photographs on their front pages. Leading fashion magazines immediately began a detailed analysis of each outfit presented, and social media literally exploded with a barrage of discussions, comments, and emotional responses. Some users expressed unbridled admiration. Others did not shy away from critical remarks. But most importantly, absolutely everyone was talking about this extravagant event. The Pink Ball, without a doubt, achieved its ambitious goal, becoming the undeniable and main topic of the day, captivating minds and conversations. But amidst all this cacophony, this informational whirlwind, a completely different note emerged. Quiet, barely discernible, almost imperceptible to those who didn't follow the royal family's life with close attention. It was a question not spoken aloud, but rather whispered, passed from mouth to mouth. Where were the princesses? Why did Beatrice and Eugenie not grace an event of such grand scale with their presence? Their absence did not go unnoticed, and everyone who was aware of the delicate situation with their father perfectly understood the true, deep reason for this forced non-attendance. For the Duke of York's daughters, this morning became another, extremely bitter reminder of the high price they had to pay for others' mistakes, not their own. To wake up and see bright photographs in the morning news of a ball that, by all accounts, they should have adorned with their royal presence. To read enthusiastic, praise-filled reviews of the Spencer sisters, who occupied the very prominent place that, by all canons, could rightfully have belonged to them. To realize that their own names were now mentioned not in the context of impeccable fashion and elegance, but exclusively in the context of the unfolding scandal and their forced, shameful absence. Beatrice, the elder sister, always stood out for her extraordinary resilience and strength of spirit. From early childhood, She was taught the art of taking a hit, not showing weakness in public, maintaining an unruffled smile even when everything inside was literally falling apart. She stoically endured press bullying over her appearance as a teenager, withstood the criticism leveled at her for unusual outfit choices, and coped with immense pressure when her personal life didn't unfold as quickly and smoothly as the public expected. Each time, she found the strength to rise and confidently continue her path forward. But the current situation was completely different. This was not just criticism of a dress or a hairstyle, not ordinary discussions of romantic relationships. This was much deeper. It was rejection. Society, which had recently welcomed her with open arms, was now politely but unequivocally making it clear, "You are no longer needed here. Your presence creates problems for us. Your surname has become toxic, tainted by scandal." Eugenie, the younger sister, was always characterized by greater emotional freedom, possessing less internal armor. She wasn't afraid to show her true emotions and openly shared her experiences with her closest confidants. For her, the current situation became a source of particularly acute pain. The young woman harbored the deepest affection and boundless love for her father, tirelessly defending his honor and dignity in all conversations. She sincerely believed that the wider public was mistaken, that sooner or later all circumstances would become clear, and the truth would surely prevail. However, justice was in no hurry to reveal itself. On the contrary, the situation only worsened. One after another, organizations ceased all contact and ties with the family. Invitations to events stopped coming. Even the charities with which the sisters had collaborated for many years began subtly distancing themselves. Not publicly, not through official statements, but simply by no longer inviting them to their events, ceasing to feature their photographs in reports. Their presence gradually, but steadily, was erased, almost imperceptibly, to outside observers. Their mother, Sarah Ferguson, sought to provide her daughters with every support. She herself had endured similar trials many years ago. Her divorce from the prince made her an unwelcome person at the palace for many years. She was denied the opportunity to attend royal weddings. She was not invited to official events. Even at jubilees where the entire royal family gathered, there was no place for her. But Sarah showed unyielding resilience, managed to build an independent and successful career, wrote books, became a television presenter, and actively engaged in charity work. She vividly demonstrated that a fulfilling existence is possible, even when ostracized from the royal circle. Now she tried to share this accumulated experience with her daughters, to instill in them the idea that life is not limited to the confines of palace walls and the glitter of social receptions. However, the daughters grew up in a completely different era. They were not officially excluded from the royal family, like their mother. They retained their high titles, formally continuing to bear the title of princesses. It was this circumstance that exacerbated the intensity of their feelings. You were, it seemed, inside the system, but essentially outside it. There was no overt banishment, but neither was there the former warmth and acceptance. They existed in a state of uncertainty and suspension, not knowing what the coming day would bring. Buckingham Palace maintained a profound silence. There were no official clarifications regarding the princess's status. The statement concerning Prince Andrew unequivocally declared, "His daughters retain their aristocratic titles and are entitled to continue representing the royal family." But in actual practice, the number of invitations to royal events steadily declined. They were not excluded from the family, but neither were they brought to the forefront of public life. King Charles, who ascended to the throne after the passing of his august mother, has consistently pursued a policy of reducing the size of the royal family. His Majesty has repeatedly expressed his conviction that the monarchy should become a more compact and efficient structure. This meant decreasing the number of individuals supported by the state and limiting the active use of royal titles in official duties. The primary focus was placed on direct heirs to the throne: the king himself, his son William, and his grandchildren. For Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, this policy ushered in an atmosphere of uncertainty. They were not direct heirs and occupied relatively distant positions in the line of succession. From the perspective of the new strategy, they were not part of the inner circle of actively working royals. However, the king was in no hurry to openly distance himself from them. After all, they were his nieces, his mother's granddaughters, bound to him by blood. Thus, the situation remained in limbo. The princesses continued to live their accustomed lives, working, raising their children, appearing at events to which they were invited, and supporting charitable projects. They strived to maintain their dignity and not reveal how difficult this prolonged uncertainty was for them. Yet, questions steadily mounted. What does the future hold for them? Will they ever be able to return to a full royal life? Or are they destined to remain forever in this gray area, princesses by title, but without a real role in the monarchy? Will they themselves want to continue this unspoken struggle? Or will they, at some point, decide to step away, as Harry and Meghan did several years ago? The incident involving the pink ball became a vivid symbol of their predicament. Formally, no one expelled them or forbade them from appearing in public, but they were very delicately given to understand that it would be better to stay home. This was to avoid provoking unnecessary questions and to prevent discussion of a brewing scandal from distracting attention from the event itself. They complied, deciding not to attend. In doing so, they managed to avoid direct confrontation, but they could not avoid the consequences. Their absence was noticed, actively discussed in society, and appropriate conclusions were drawn. Meanwhile, the Spencer sisters reveled in their triumph. Their modeling careers received a powerful boost. Offers of collaboration poured in, one after another. Renowned brands sought to partner with the young women who had suddenly become the true stars of the pink ball. Magazines invited them for exclusive photo shoots, and organizers of other social events dreamed of having them among their honored guests. A comparison, like a shadow, relentlessly followed them, becoming an unavoidable part of their new reality. While Diana's nieces, like rising stars, rapidly gained prominence, Andrew's daughters, conversely, felt their positions steadily decline. One group confidently captured public attention and popularity, while the other, to their chagrin, swiftly lost their once secure standing. The press, keenly sensing this dynamic, underscored the striking contrast with undisguised pleasure, turning it into a constant subject of discussion and headlines. For Beatrice and Eugenie, the moment of a fateful choice had arrived, either to accept the new reality and, with wisdom, find their unique place in a world changed beyond recognition, or to engage in a desperate struggle, attempting to reclaim the lost position they once held. Each of these paths, undoubtedly, came with its own significant price. The path of acceptance meant acknowledging that their former royal life, as it had existed, had come to its logical conclusion. Titles, of course, would remain with them, but a real, meaningful role in the monarchy would be irretrievably lost. This required them to build something entirely their own careers in no way connected to the royal court, a life where their true value would be determined not by noble blood, but by personal achievements and diligence. This was the very path their mother, Sarah Ferguson, chose many years ago, a path full of difficulties and trials, but ultimately leading to the attainment of genuine freedom. The struggle, conversely, entailed continuing public appearances at invited events, maintaining an unwavering smile under the constant scrutiny of cameras, ignoring sidelong glances and unkind whispers behind their backs, and continuously proving their right to be an integral part of the royal family. This was a hope that in time, the scandal that had clouded their lives would be forgotten, that their father, Prince Andrew, would be rehabilitated, or at least cease to be a central figure in the news, and that life would finally return to its former, familiar course. However, a legitimate question arose. Would it truly return? History, as is well known, clearly demonstrates that royal scandals are not forgotten. They become an indelible part of biographies for decades, and sometimes for centuries. Edward VIII abdicated almost a century ago, but his name is still recalled precisely in the context of that fateful decision. Diana passed away nearly 30 years ago, but her story remains a subject of active discussion. Prince Andrew, unfortunately, will become part of this sad list, and his daughters, whether they like it or not, will forever be inextricably linked to this story in the eyes of the wider public. The Pink Ball, that bright yet fateful evening, drew to a close. Guests gradually departed, taking their impressions with them. The Spencer sisters, as if by magic, awoke as celebrities whose names were now on everyone's lips. And Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie awoke with a clear and painful realization. The world around them had fundamentally changed, and they would have to change with it to survive, or else remain in the past, vainly clinging to titles that no longer opened doors, but merely served as a bitter reminder of what once was and would never be again. The ordeal continued, with no end in sight, like an endless road in the fog. The weeks following the Pink Ball became a true test of endurance for them, where each day brought new, sometimes very painful, reminders of how irreversibly reality had changed for Prince Andrew's daughters. Life went on as usual, but beneath the surface of normalcy, a tension simmered, giving them no peace. They woke up in the mornings, cared for their children, went to work, met friends. Outwardly, everything looked perfectly normal. But beneath this surface, an inner turmoil churned. Beatrice, for example, desperately tried to maintain her career in the rapidly evolving technology sector. Princess Beatrice worked in various commercial organizations where her professional activities focused on innovation and strategic planning. Her strong educational background and deep knowledge in these areas were always highly valued by employers, making her a valuable specialist. However, paradoxically, her royal title, once perceived as an undeniable advantage, was now gradually transforming into a significant obstacle. Business partners of the company she worked for began to harbor serious concerns, questioning whether their reputation would suffer irreparable damage from an association with a princess whose family was at the center of widely publicized and highly unpleasant scandals. The atmosphere at business meetings became increasingly charged. Although no one dared to voice their doubts openly, Princess Beatrice clearly sensed that her position and professional role were undergoing an unspoken yet evident review. Projects in which she had played an active part in development and implementation were now quietly and without explanation handed over to other specialists. Invitations to key strategic meetings became significantly less frequent, and her expert opinion, once so weighty, was now more often ignored or not taken into account at all. Formally, Beatrice remained on the company's payroll, maintaining her employee status. However, she was effectively becoming an awkward decoration, a figure they didn't know how to get rid of without provoking an even larger and more undesirable public outcry. Meanwhile, Princess Eugenie continued her professional work at an art gallery. Art, as is well known, had been her true passion since her youth, and she enthusiastically organized exhibitions, fostered fruitful collaborations with artists, and discovered new, unrecognized talents. The gallery became a true bastion of calm for her, a kind of sanctuary where she could finally be just Eugenie, free from the burden of her royal title and the constant attention of scandalous newspaper headlines. However, even here, in her personal space, the atmosphere was inexorably changing. Influential collectors, who had previously eagerly collaborated with her, now began to prefer other managers. Artists who once proudly declared that their exhibition was curated by the princess herself now started to harbor serious concerns about whether her name would deter potential buyers and art connoisseurs. The gallery management, not wishing to create an additional precedent or exacerbate an already difficult situation, did not dismiss Eugenie. Instead, they began to methodically and very cautiously push her into the background. Her name ceased to appear in official press releases, and photographs from public events she attended were no longer published in the press. The princess continued to perform her duties, but her work now proceeded exclusively in the shadows, devoid of its former public attention and recognition. Public life for the sisters became a veritable minefield, where every step required meticulous thought and analysis. Each invitation to a social event automatically initiated an internal dialogue. Should they even accept it? Would their presence be appropriate in the current situation? And would it create an awkward situation for the organizers? And most importantly, would the entire evening turn into a series of intrusive questions about their father, completely overshadowing the main topic of the event? As a result, the sisters increasingly began to decline even those invitations that were sincere and welcome. It seemed much simpler to remain in the solitude of their own homes than to risk enduring another public humiliation. It was easier to avoid glances filled with either feigned sympathy or outright condemnation. And, of course, it was much simpler not to read articles the next day in newspapers and online publications about how the princesses appeared tense, withdrawn, or completely out of place. The princess's friends also experienced a peculiar division. Some maintained unwavering loyalty, continuing to invite them to private dinners, regularly calling to check in, and offering their help without any reciprocal demands. These individuals became a genuine support system for Beatrice and Eugenie. In harsh circumstances, they realized who their true friends were and who had merely maintained an acquaintance for the sake of titles and influential connections. Others, however, gradually disappeared from their lives. They stopped calling, cited extreme busyness when the princesses tried to reach out, and forgot to invite them to events where their presence had once always been welcome. Thus, their accustomed social circles inexorably narrowed, leaving behind a feeling of alienation. Their familiar world of social gatherings, charity galas, and diplomatic receptions at embassies became increasingly inaccessible. The royal family, in turn, maintained a certain distance. Formally, ties were not severed. Beatrice and Eugenie continued to appear at family celebrations, Christmas at the palace, Easter, birthdays of close relatives. Invitations were extended, but the overall atmosphere noticeably changed. King Charles was polite, but his demeanor was palpably cold. He undoubtedly harbored affection for his nieces, but the situation with their father placed him in an extremely difficult position. The monarchy, as is well known, demanded sacrifices. Prince Andrew became that inevitable sacrifice that had to be made to preserve the crown's reputation. And Andrew's daughters, whether the king liked it or not, inadvertently found themselves part of this forced sacrifice. Prince William and Princess Kate maintained a friendly attitude, but between the lines of their behavior, an unambiguous message was conveyed. Our paths have diverged. William, as the future monarch, could not afford close ties with family members whose names were tainted by scandal. His primary task was to prepare for the throne, maintain an impeccable reputation, and protect the monarchy from any potential threats. His cousins, unfortunately, came to be perceived as an undesirable factor, a potential threat to the stability and image of the crown. Prince Harry and Meghan had already left the royal family by that point. Their story, though different in details, shared similar traits. They too faced immense pressure and the inability to live as they wished within the strict confines of the monarchy. They made the decision to break away, moved, and built a new life on the American continent. For Beatrice and Eugenie, this example served as both a warning and a potential path to a new existence. Could they do the same? Renounce their titles, all ties to the monarchy, everything that had defined them since birth? Start with a clean slate somewhere? Far from Britain, where their surname would not immediately evoke associations with scandal. This was an extremely tempting option. To gain freedom from the burden of expectations, from the constant need to prove their right to exist, from glances filled with judgment or pity. However, it would mean betraying their father, who needed their support more than ever before. It would mean abandoning their mother, who herself had once experienced ostracism and knew perfectly well what it meant to stand alone against the world. Prince Andrew, meanwhile, was living his own deeply personal drama. He had become a true recluse, rarely leaving his home, carefully avoiding any public places or social contacts. Photographs, miraculously leaked to the press, mercilessly showed the image of an aged, gaunt man whose facial features spoke of persistent sadness and exhaustion. The once dashing military pilot, proud of his service and a self-assured member of the royal family, now seemed merely a pale shadow of his former self. His daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, regularly visited their father, desperately trying to lift his spirits, to convince him that life inevitably goes on, that any scandal would eventually subside, that people tend to forget, and that there was still a chance to fix everything. However, the prince did not believe their words. He saw with bitter clarity how everything he had painstakingly built and protected for decades was crumbling. Reputation, high status, universal respect, all of it vanished like a mirage in a matter of months. But the most agonizing thing for him was the realization of his irreparable guilt towards his own daughters. He understood perfectly well that his rash actions had destroyed not only his own life, but also their future. Beatrice and Eugenie were absolutely blameless, yet they were the ones who had to pay for his fatal mistakes. This knowledge, like poison, gnawed at him from within, giving him no peace day or night. He sincerely asked for their forgiveness, promising to do everything possible to rectify the situation. But what, in essence, could he do? Titles were irretrievably lost, an impeccable reputation shattered to dust, and there seemed to be no way back. In these dark times, Sarah Ferguson made colossal efforts to somehow piece together the fracturing family. She organized joint dinners, invited her daughters with their children, her grandchildren, striving to create a fragile illusion of normal life, where the whole family gathered together despite the furious storms raging in the outside world. For the grandchildren, this was incredibly important. Children should not suffer because of adult problems and mistakes. They deserved a happy, carefree childhood, surrounded by the love and care of their grandmother and grandfather. But even Sarah, who herself had gone through many scandals and managed to endure, understood. This time, the situation was far more serious. Her own divorce from the prince and subsequent financial difficulties seemed trivial compared to what had befallen Andrew. She lost her title and place in the palace, but she never lost her freedom and the opportunity to build a new life. Andrew, however, had lost absolutely everything, and this pervasive loss, like chains, dragged his daughters down with him. Months dragged on unbearably slowly, each day strangely similar to the last. Work, home, children, and very rare, obligatory public appearances. Life had turned into a monotonous routine, utterly devoid of its former joy, anticipation of change, or bright hopes. Beatrice and Eugenie tried with all their might to maintain a positive outlook, for their children, for their husbands, for themselves, so as not to let despair consume them. However, fatigue, both physical and moral, inexorably accumulated, threatening to break their spirit. So they were constantly tormented by a question that pricked their souls like thorns. How long would this uncertainty last? A year, 2, 5, or perhaps a whole decade? Was their father destined to remain an outcast forever? Would they ever be able to return to their accustomed way of life? Or was this constant balancing act on the fine line between royal status and complete rejection their new reality? No answers came. Buckingham Palace maintained a deathly silence, like a mute witness. Meanwhile, the press, tirelessly digging into the past, unearthed new details and fanned old scandals, like fire under dry branches. Public opinion remained unyielding, like a granite rock, foretelling no forgiveness. In this desperate situation, the princesses faced a fateful decision: to continue living in limbo, vainly hoping for the best, or to take the reins of their destiny into their own hands and forge a completely new path, entirely independent of titles, palace walls, and imposed royal duties. The pink ball, which was the subject of discussion, became an unambiguous symbol that their former life was irrevocably gone. Doors that once opened before them effortlessly were now tightly shut. Their place in the sun, it seemed, had to be reclaimed anew, but with completely different means and methods. This ordeal, for Prince Andrew's daughters, was only just beginning. The pink ball was merely one of many chapters in this challenging story. Ahead lay new, sometimes agonizing choices, new difficulties that could await around every corner, and new questions for which there were no ready answers. And only the relentless march of time could tell whether two princesses, born into luxury and surrounded by privilege, would find their true place in a world that, it seemed, no longer wished to see them at the forefront of public life. King Charles, who ascended to the throne after the passing of his august mother, has consistently pursued a policy of reducing the size of the royal family. His Majesty has repeatedly expressed his conviction that the monarchy should become a more compact and efficient structure. This meant decreasing the number of individuals supported by the state and limiting the active use of royal titles in official duties. The primary focus was placed on direct heirs to the throne: the king himself, his son William, and his grandchildren. For princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, this policy ushered in an atmosphere of uncertainty. They were not direct heirs and occupied relatively distant positions in the line of succession. From the perspective of the new strategy, they were not part of the inner circle of actively working royals. However, the king was in no hurry to openly distance himself from them. After all, they were his nieces, his mother's granddaughters, bound to him by blood. Thus, the situation remained in limbo. The princesses continued to live their accustomed lives, working, raising their children, appearing at events to which they were invited, and supporting charitable projects. They strived to maintain their dignity and not reveal how difficult this prolonged uncertainty was for them. Yet, questions steadily mounted. What does the future hold for them? Will they ever be able to return to a full royal life? Or are they destined to remain forever in this gray area, princesses by title, but without a real role in the monarchy. Will they themselves want to continue this unspoken struggle? Or will they, at some point, decide to step away, as Harry and Meghan did several years ago? The incident involving the pink ball became a vivid symbol of their predicament. Formally, no one expelled them or forbade them from appearing in public, but they were very delicately given to understand that it would be better to stay home. This was to avoid provoking unnecessary questions and to prevent discussion of a brewing scandal from distracting attention from the event itself. They complied, deciding not to attend. In doing so, they managed to avoid direct confrontation, but they could not avoid the consequences. Their absence was noticed, actively discussed in society, and appropriate conclusions were drawn. Meanwhile, the Spencer sisters reveled in their triumph. Their modeling careers received a powerful boost. Offers of collaboration poured in, one after another. Renowned brands sought to partner with the young women who had suddenly become the true stars of the pink ball. Magazines invited them for exclusive photo shoots, and organizers of other social events dreamed of having them among their honored guests. A comparison, like a shadow, relentlessly followed them, becoming an unavoidable part of their new reality. While Diana's nieces, like rising stars, rapidly gained prominence, Andrew's daughters, conversely, felt their positions steadily decline. One group confidently captured public attention and popularity, while the other, to their chagrin, swiftly lost their once secure standing. The press, keenly sensing this dynamic, underscored the striking contrast with undisguised pleasure, turning it into a constant subject of discussion and headlines. For Beatrice and Eugenie, the moment of a fateful choice had arrived, either to accept the new reality and with wisdom find their unique place in a world changed beyond recognition, or to engage in a desperate struggle, attempting to reclaim the lost position they once held. Each of these paths, undoubtedly, came with its own significant price. The path of acceptance meant acknowledging that their former royal life, as it had existed, had come to its logical conclusion. Titles, of course, would remain with them, but a real, meaningful role in the monarchy would be irretrievably lost. This required them to build something entirely their own careers, in no way connected to the royal court, a life where their true value would be determined not by noble blood, but by personal achievements and diligence. This was the very path their mother, Sarah Ferguson, chose many years ago, a path full of difficulties and trials, but ultimately leading to the attainment of genuine freedom. The struggle, conversely, entailed continuing public appearances at invited events, maintaining an unwavering smile under the constant scrutiny of cameras, ignoring sidelong glances and unkind whispers behind their backs, and continuously proving their right to be an integral part of the royal family. This was a hope that, in time, the scandal that had clouded their lives would be forgotten, that their father, Prince Andrew, would be rehabilitated, or at least cease to be a central figure in the news, and that life would finally return to its former, familiar course. However, a legitimate question arose. Would it truly return? History, as is well known, clearly demonstrates that royal scandals are not forgotten. They become an indelible part of biographies for decades, and sometimes for centuries. Edward VIII abdicated almost a century ago, but his name is still recalled precisely in the context of that fateful decision. Diana passed away nearly 30 years ago, but her story remains a subject of active discussion. Prince Andrew, unfortunately, will become part of this sad list, and his daughters, whether they like it or not, will forever be inextricably linked to this story in the eyes of the wider public. The pink ball, that bright yet fateful evening, drew to a close. Guests gradually departed, taking their impressions with them. The Spencer sisters, as if by magic, awoke as celebrities whose names were now on everyone's lips. And Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie awoke with a clear and painful realization. The world around them had fundamentally changed, and they would have to change with it to survive, or else remain in the past, vainly clinging to titles that no longer opened doors, but merely served as a bitter reminder of what once was and would never be again. The ordeal continued, with no end in sight, like an endless road in the fog. The weeks following the pink ball became a true test of endurance for them, where each day brought new, sometimes very painful, reminders of how irreversibly reality had changed for Prince Andrew's daughters. Life went on as usual, but beneath the surface of normalcy, a tension simmered, giving them no peace. They woke up in the mornings, cared for their children, went to work, met friends. Outwardly, everything looked perfectly normal, but beneath this surface, an inner turmoil churned. Beatrice, for example, desperately tried to maintain her career in the rapidly evolving technology sector. Princess Beatrice worked in various commercial organizations, where her professional activities focused on innovation and strategic planning. Her strong educational background and deep knowledge in these areas were always highly valued by employers, making her a valuable specialist. However, paradoxically, her royal title, once perceived as an undeniable advantage, was now gradually transforming into a significant obstacle. Business partners of the companies she worked for began to harbor serious concerns, questioning whether their reputation would suffer irreparable damage from an association with a princess whose family was at the center of widely publicized and highly unpleasant scandals. The atmosphere at business meetings became increasingly charged. Although no one dared to voice their doubts openly, Princess Beatrice clearly sensed that her position and professional role were undergoing an unspoken yet evident review. Projects in which she had played an active part in development and implementation were now quietly and without explanation handed over to other specialists. Invitations to key strategic meetings became significantly less frequent, and her expert opinion, once so weighty, was now more often ignored or not taken into account at all. Formally, Beatrice remained on the company's payroll, maintaining her employee status. However, she was effectively becoming an awkward decoration, a figure they didn't know how to get rid of without provoking an even larger and more undesirable public outcry. Meanwhile, Princess Eugenie continued her professional work at an art gallery. Art, as is well known, had been her true passion since her youth, and she enthusiastically organized exhibitions, fostered fruitful collaborations with artists, and discovered new, unrecognized talents. The gallery became a true bastion of calm for her, a kind of sanctuary where she could finally be just Eugenie, free from the burden of her royal title and the constant attention of scandalous newspaper headlines. However, even here, in her personal space, the atmosphere was inexorably changing. Influential collectors, who had previously eagerly collaborated with her, now began to prefer other managers. Artists who once proudly declared that their exhibition was curated by the princess herself now started to harbor serious concerns about whether her name would deter potential buyers and art connoisseurs. The gallery management, not wishing to create an additional precedent or exacerbate an already difficult situation, did not dismiss Eugenie. Instead, they began to methodically and very cautiously push her into the background. Her name ceased to appear in official press releases, and photographs from public events she attended were no longer published in the press. The princess continued to perform her duties, but her work now proceeded exclusively in the shadows, devoid of its former public attention and recognition. Public life for the sisters became a veritable minefield, where every step required meticulous thought and analysis. Each invitation to a social event automatically initiated an internal dialogue. Should they even accept it? Would their presence be appropriate in the current situation? And would it create an awkward situation for the organizers? And most importantly, would the entire evening turn into a series of intrusive questions about their father, completely overshadowing the main topic of the event? As a result, the sisters increasingly began to decline even those invitations that were sincere and welcome. It seemed much simpler to remain in the solitude of their own homes than to risk enduring another public humiliation. It was easier to avoid glances filled with either feigned sympathy or outright condemnation. And, of course, it was much simpler not to read articles the next day in newspapers and online publications about how the princesses appeared tense, withdrawn, or completely out of place. The princesses' friends also experienced a peculiar division. Some maintained unwavering loyalty, continuing to invite them to private dinners, regularly calling to check in, and offering their help without any reciprocal demands. These individuals became a genuine support system for Beatrice and Eugenie. In harsh circumstances, they realized who their true friends were and who had merely maintained an acquaintance for the sake of titles and influential connections. Others, however, gradually disappeared from their lives. They stopped calling, cited extreme busyness when the princesses tried to reach out, and forgot to invite them to events where their presence had once always been welcome. Thus, their accustomed social circles inexorably narrowed, leaving behind a feeling of alienation. Their familiar world of social gatherings, charity galas, and diplomatic receptions at embassies became increasingly inaccessible. The royal family, in turn, maintained a certain distance. Formally, ties were not severed. Beatrice and Eugenie continued to appear at family celebrations, Christmas at the palace, Easter, birthdays of close relatives. Invitations were extended, but the overall atmosphere noticeably changed. King Charles was polite, but his demeanor was palpably cold. He undoubtedly harbored affection for his nieces, but the situation with their father placed him in an extremely difficult position. The monarchy, as is well known, demanded sacrifices. Prince Andrew became that inevitable sacrifice that had to be made to preserve the crown's reputation. And Andrew's daughters, whether the king liked it or not, inadvertently found themselves part of this forced sacrifice. Prince William and Princess Kate maintained a friendly attitude, but between the lines of their behavior, an unambiguous message was conveyed. Our paths have diverged. William, as the future monarch, could not afford close ties with family members whose names were tainted by scandal. His primary task was to prepare for the throne, maintain an impeccable reputation, and protect the monarchy from any potential threats. His cousins, unfortunately, came to be perceived as an undesirable factor, a potential threat to the stability and image of the crown. Prince Harry and Meghan had already left the royal family by that point. Their story, though different in details, shared similar traits. They too faced immense pressure and the inability to live as they wished within the strict confines of the monarchy. They made the decision to break away, moved, and built a new life on the American continent. For Beatrice and Eugenie, this example served as both a warning and a potential path to a new existence. Could they do the same? Renounce their titles, all ties to the monarchy, everything that had defined them since birth? Start with a clean slate somewhere far from Britain, where their surname would not immediately evoke associations with scandal? This was an extremely tempting option. To gain freedom from the burden of expectations, from the constant need to prove their right to exist, from glances filled with judgment or pity. However, it would mean betraying their father, who needed their support more than ever before. It would mean abandoning their mother, who herself had once experienced ostracism and knew perfectly well what it meant to stand alone against the world. Prince Andrew, meanwhile, was living his own deeply personal drama. He had become a true recluse, rarely leaving his home, carefully avoiding any public places or social contacts. Photographs, miraculously leaked to the press, mercilessly showed the image of an aged, gaunt man whose facial features spoke of persistent sadness and exhaustion. The once dashing military pilot, proud of his service and a self-assured member of the royal family, now seemed merely a pale shadow of his former self. His daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, regularly visited their father, desperately trying to lift his spirits, to convince him that life inevitably goes on, that any scandal would eventually subside, that people tend to forget, and that there was still a chance to fix everything. However, the prince did not believe their words. He saw with bitter clarity how everything he had painstakingly built and protected for decades was crumbling. Reputation, high status, universal respect, all of it vanished like a mirage in a matter of months. But the most agonizing thing for him was the realization of his irreparable guilt towards his own daughters. He understood perfectly well that his rash actions had destroyed not only his own life, but also their future. Beatrice and Eugenie were absolutely blameless, yet they were the ones who had to pay for his fatal mistakes. This knowledge, like poison, gnawed at him from within, giving him no peace day or night. He sincerely asked for their forgiveness, promising to do everything possible to rectify the situation. But what, in essence, could he do? Titles were irretrievably lost, an impeccable reputation shattered to dust, and there seemed to be no way back. In these dark times, Sarah Ferguson made colossal efforts to somehow piece together the fracturing family. She organized joint dinners, invited her daughters with their children, her grandchildren, striving to create a fragile illusion of normal life, where the whole family gathered together despite the furious storms raging in the outside world. For the grandchildren, this was incredibly important. Children should not suffer because of adult problems and mistakes. They deserved a happy, carefree childhood, surrounded by the love and care of their grandmother and grandfather. But even Sarah, who herself had gone through many scandals and managed to endure, understood. This time, the situation was far more serious. Her own divorce from the prince and subsequent financial difficulties seemed trivial compared to what had befell Andrew. She lost her title and place in the palace, but she never lost her freedom and the opportunity to build a new life. Andrew, however, had lost absolutely everything, and this pervasive loss, like chains, dragged his daughters down with him. Months dragged on unbearably slowly, each day strangely similar to the last. Work, home, children, and very rare, obligatory public appearances. Life had turned into a monotonous routine, utterly devoid of its former joy, anticipation of change, or bright hopes. Beatrice and Eugenie tried with all their might to maintain a positive outlook, for their children, for their husbands, for themselves, so as not to let despair consume them. However, fatigue, both physical and moral, inexorably accumulated, threatening to break their spirit. So they were constantly tormented by a question that pricked their souls like thorns. How long would this uncertainty last? A year? 2? 5? Or perhaps a whole decade? Was their father destined to remain an outcast forever? Would they ever be able to return to their accustomed way of life? Or was this constant balancing act on the fine line between royal status and complete rejection their new reality? No answers came. Buckingham Palace maintained a deathly silence, like a mute witness. Meanwhile, the press, tirelessly digging into the past, unearthed new details and fanned old scandals, like fire under dry branches. Public opinion remained unyielding, like a granite rock, foretelling no forgiveness. In this desperate situation, the princesses faced a fateful decision: to continue living in limbo, vainly hoping for the best, or to take the reins of their destiny into their own hands and forge a completely new path, entirely independent of titles, palace walls, and imposed royal duties. The pink ball, which was the subject of discussion, became an unambiguous symbol that their former life was irrevocably gone. Doors that once opened before them effortlessly were now tightly shut. Their place in the sun, it seemed, had to be reclaimed anew, but with completely different means and methods. This ordeal, for Prince Andrew's daughters, was only just beginning. The pink ball was merely one of many chapters in this challenging story. Ahead lay new, sometimes agonizing, choices, new difficulties that could await around every corner, and new questions for which there were no ready answers. And only the relentless march of time could tell whether two princesses, born into luxury and surrounded by privilege, would find their true place in a world that, it seemed, no longer wished to see them at the forefront of public life. It had been 6 months since that memorable evening at the British Museum. 6 months during which the lives of Beatrice and Eugenie continued to change inexorably, in ways they could not have foreseen. The royal family, like an ancient organism, lived by its own unwritten laws, where rules were rarely spoken aloud, but always strictly observed with unwavering precision. And the most important of these rules stated, the monarchy, as an institution, stands immeasurably above the personal fates of each of its members. Meanwhile, King Charles actively continued his reforms. His vision for a modern monarchy grew clearer and more defined with each passing month. He aimed for fewer ceremonies, greater efficiency, and the formation of a core group of working family members who would receive funding from the public purse. The rest, he envisioned, would be self-sufficient, retaining their titles, but losing their former privileges. For the princesses, this meant a final clarification of their position. They were not excluded from the family, nor stripped of their honorary titles, but it was unequivocally made clear that they should not expect state support. They remained princesses by birthright, but were not working members of the royal family. Their future, therefore, was entirely in their own hands. This decision, paradoxically, was both a kind of liberation and a sentence. On one hand, a completely new perspective opened up for them. There was no longer a need to follow burdensome and strict royal protocol. From then on, they had the freedom to build their own careers without looking to the palace for approval or disapproval, to engage in entrepreneurship if they wished, to travel the world at their leisure, and, in general, to live a life indistinguishable from that of millions of ordinary citizens. On the other hand, this newfound freedom inevitably meant the loss of the comprehensive security and protection that had been granted to them since birth. After all, the royal family is not just a collection of titles and a series of official ceremonies. It is a complex and powerful network of support, extensive connections, and unprecedented opportunities. It is doors that open automatically the moment you touch them. It is reliable protection in the most difficult times. And all of this, alas, was irrevocably disappearing. Beatrice was the first to make a fateful decision. She left her position at a technology company, where the work atmosphere had become utterly unbearable over time. Instead, she fully focused on philanthropy, choosing areas that genuinely interested her and where she felt a deep personal involvement. Her attention centered on crucial issues such as education for children with dyslexia, a problem she herself had faced in childhood. She also actively supported young entrepreneurs and the development of technology for social good, Soon, Beatrice began establishing her own fund, modest in scale, but highly ambitious in its goals. She operated without royal patronage, without state funding, relying solely on her own efforts, private donations, and collaboration with like-minded individuals. This was undoubtedly a risk, as many charitable organizations fail in their early years, but Beatrice was ready to try. She firmly believed that it was better to build something of her own, and perhaps fail, than to continue living in the shadow of an unending scandal, with no control over her own destiny. Eugenie chose a similar path, but remained true to the art world, beginning to operate entirely independently. She opened a consulting agency specializing in working with young artists and collectors. Her mission was to help talented creators find suitable galleries, advise collectors on building their collections, and organize private exhibitions that didn't require numerous corporate approvals and endorsements. Undoubtedly, her title still opened some doors, sparking natural curiosity and intrigue among those who had the opportunity to collaborate with a real princess. However, Eugenie quickly made it clear she was, first and foremost, a professional, not merely a decorative element. Her deep knowledge, impeccable taste, and extensive connections in the art world were valued in their own right. The title was a pleasant bonus, but never the foundation of her professional activities. Both sisters, the Princesses of York, began appearing at public events much more frequently, yet their choice of engagements became far more conscious and deliberate. They now avoided gatherings where their presence might cause awkwardness or become fodder for gossip. Instead, their attention focused on events directly related to their own, newly launched projects. These included charity galas they meticulously organized with personal involvement, exhibitions by talented artists they actively supported, providing them with a platform for expression, and conferences on educational innovation and advanced technologies, where they participated not as passive royal guests, but as full-fledged experts, possessing deep knowledge and experience. Members of the press could not help but notice these radical changes in their public image. Articles dedicated to the princesses took on an entirely different character. Journalists now paid significantly less attention to the old scandal involving their father, shifting focus to the active and fruitful work of the princesses themselves. Fashion magazines, which previously might have overlooked them, began to show renewed interest, inviting them to exclusive photo shoots. In doing so, they positioned the sisters not as faceless representatives of the monarchy, but as successful, strong women who had managed to build impressive careers despite all obstacles and unfavorable circumstances. Meanwhile, the Spencer sisters continued their meteoric rise in the world of fashion and high society. Their popularity, which soared after the famous Pink Ball, had not waned but only strengthened. They secured lucrative contracts with leading fashion houses. Their faces graced the covers of the most prestigious magazines, and invitations to the world's most significant and exclusive events poured in. They confidently transformed into true style icons, achieving this status without any royal title. Through their example, they vividly demonstrated that while a well-known surname and influential connections can indeed open many doors, staying in this world and achieving true recognition and success can only be accomplished through one's own persistent efforts, talent, and hard work. Comparison between the two pairs of sisters, the Spencers and the Yorks, was inevitable and often appeared in the press. They were contrasted as the nieces of a legendary figure versus the daughters of a disgraced man. However, over time, this sharp comparison gradually lost its relevance and intensity. It became increasingly clear that each pair of sisters had chosen their own unique path. The Spencers fully immersed themselves in the world of high fashion and vibrant social life, where they shone. The Yorks, on the other hand, focused on philanthropy and developing their professional careers. It became clear that both these paths had every right to exist, and each led to its own achievements. Prince Andrew remained deeply in the shadows, his public appearances extremely rare. His life had noticeably narrowed, confined mostly to the estate, his family circle, and very infrequent solitary walks. He watched his daughters, with incredible resilience, build their new lives, and complex emotions, pride and pain, mingled in his heart. Pride that they had not broken under pressure, and had found the strength to move forward, and deep pain from the agonizing realization that they had to go through all these trials precisely because of him, because of his mistakes. Sarah Ferguson continued to play a key role as the family's connecting link. She tirelessly organized family gatherings, creating an atmosphere where her daughters could truly relax, shed all worries, and forget about the outside world, full of judgment and pressure. Her grandchildren grew up in an atmosphere of unconditional love and care, completely oblivious to the complexity and drama of the situation. For them, Grandma and Grandpa were simply loving relatives, owners of a large and interesting house, always ready to share fascinating stories and offer the warmth of their hearts. Quiet reconciliation and a new chapter in the princesses' lives. Gradually, like a glacier beginning to move, the royal family began to show signs of softening its once unyielding stance. A significant gesture was the invitation extended personally by King Charles to his nieces, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, to a formal reception at the palace. This event was momentous, as such an invitation was the first in many long months. It carried an unequivocal message. You have not been entirely cast out. Family ties remain unbroken, even when circumstances are extremely difficult. Upon arriving at the reception, Beatrice and Eugenie carried themselves with imperturbable dignity, avoiding any attempts to draw undue attention to themselves. Their presence was a statement in itself. We are here. We are an integral part of this family, even if our role within it has undergone significant changes. The attitude of Prince William and Princess Kate also became noticeably warmer. This was especially true for Kate, who herself was once an outsider entering the age-old traditions of the royal family. She perfectly understood what it was like to be under the constant pressure of expectations and strict rules. It was she who extended a hand of friendship, inviting her nieces to private family gatherings where their children could play freely together. These simple but sincere gestures held immense significance. They offered Beatrice and Eugenie much-needed hope. The rift was not final, and over time, relationships could indeed be restored. A year passed, then a second. Life inexorably settled into its new, unfamiliar rhythm. The scandal, though not forgotten, gradually lost its former intensity. Other news, other dramas appeared on the media horizon, and the press, following its nature, quickly shifted to new, more hot topics. Prince Andrew's name still evoked negative associations, but it no longer appeared on the front pages of newspapers daily, as it had before. Meanwhile, Beatrice and Eugenie managed to find their own niche in this changed world. They ceased to be socialite stars, as they once were, but instead transformed into respected professionals in their fields of activity. Beatrice's charitable projects began to yield tangible and quite impressive results. Hundreds of children received necessary help and support, and dozens of young entrepreneurs were able to launch their startups thanks to her active and focused backing. Eugenie's consulting agency also experienced significant growth. She actively collaborated with artists from various countries around the world and organized several high-profile and successful exhibitions. Her name became widely known in professional circles not as Princess Eugenie, but as Eugenie Brooksbank, a recognized expert in contemporary art. They both learned to live without the constant attention of ubiquitous cameras, without weekly appearances in society columns, without the tiresome expectation that every move they made would be discussed by millions of people. This was a special kind of freedom, the freedom to be themselves, not the image created for the general. Public. The pink ball remained forever in their memory as a turning point. That very evening when it finally became clear, the old life had irrevocably ended. However, instead of breaking under the weight of circumstances, the princesses managed to build a new life, perhaps not as brilliant as before, and not as easy, but their own, authentic, based not on the title given to them at birth, but on who they became through their own tireless efforts and inner strength. The ordeal they experienced, provoked by the loud scandal involving their father, served as a catalyst for deep internal changes. From once merely nominal princesses, perceived by society more as part of the palace decor, they transformed into mature, self-sufficient women. This path required colossal sacrifices. They had to part with their accustomed high status, privileged position in society, and, what was especially painful, with the illusion of immutable protection afforded by belonging to the royal family. However, in return, they gained something immeasurably more significant: a deep awareness of their own inner strength, and an unwavering confidence in their ability to withstand and continue their journey, even if the entire surrounding world suddenly turned away from them. Meanwhile, the Spencer sisters seemed to continue to shine serenely in their accustomed world, as if untouched by others' misfortunes. The daughters of the Duke of York, despite all difficulties, managed to find and confidently forge their own, utterly unique path. Thus, the fates of these women, so different in their essence, became intricately intertwined by one momentous evening at the British Museum. One narrative spoke of dazzling triumph, the other of a courageous struggle for survival. Both these stories, each in its own way, offered a profound reflection on what it means to be a woman inextricably linked to the royal family. In an era when established rules and societal expectations are transforming at dizzying speed, often outstripping a person's ability to adapt, it was a narrative of pressure, expectations, and the need to redefine one's role in an ever-changing landscape. The so-called pink ball had long since passed, becoming merely a vague memory for most. However, its profound and far-reaching consequences continued to tangibly shape the lives not only of those who were present that momentous evening, but also of those who were not. Their shared history was by no means concluded. It continued to be actively written with each new dawn, with each conscious choice, with each bold step into an unknown, uncertain future. Time, that relentless and sometimes peculiar substance, relentlessly moved forward. Exactly 3 years had passed since that fateful and resonant palace announcement that had turned their world upside down. Princesses. Beatrice and Eugenie had not merely resigned themselves, but had fully learned to live in a completely different, new reality for them. Their charitable projects, once seemingly modest beginnings, now yielded tangible and inspiring results, and their professional careers successfully developed, entirely independent of their former royal status. They resolutely left behind the passive waiting for invitations to social events where, as they clearly understood, their presence would be unwelcome or even burdensome. Instead, showing initiative and enterprise, the princesses actively began organizing their own events, creating spaces where they not only felt needed, but could also bring real benefit. The fund established by Princess Beatrice provided invaluable assistance to hundreds of children suffering from dyslexia, giving them hope for full development and education. At the same time, Princess Eugenie's creative agency actively sought out and nurtured bright talents among young and promising artists, providing them with a platform for self-expression. This was not just activity, but genuine, meaningful work that brought them deep personal satisfaction and a sense of their own significance. Meanwhile, relations with the royal family, once so strained, gradually began to mend, albeit without any public announcement, exclusively through personal, confidential contacts. King Charles, showing care and attention, regularly invited his nieces to warm family dinners, and Prince William and Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, noticeably softened their attitude, becoming more open and friendly. Their children, in turn, happily played together during private meetings, which testified to the slow but steady healing of the once deep rift. Prince Andrew, the cause of so much upheaval, still preferred to remain deeply in the shadows, avoiding any public appearances. His health, undermined by colossal stress and public condemnation, had noticeably deteriorated. However, observing the astonishing resilience and dignity with which his daughters coped with all the trials that befell them, he found the strength to continue living, drawing inspiration from their unyielding spirit. Sarah, as always during the most difficult and uncertain times, remained the unshakable backbone that held the family together, preventing it from falling apart. Meanwhile, in the raging torrent of information, the pink ball had long since faded from the collective memory of the public. New loud scandals had replaced it. New heroes had emerged, and newspaper headlines now featured entirely different stories. However, for Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, that fateful evening forever remained not just a memory, but a powerful symbol. The critical point after which their lives radically changed, beginning an entirely new, unexplored chapter. A completely different life. 5 years had passed since that unforgettable evening within the walls of the British Museum. Beatrice, standing before a mirror, meticulously adjusted the folds of her dress. Today heralded her presentation at a prestigious conference dedicated to innovations in education. She was not merely a participant, but the keynote speaker, appearing not as a princess by birth, but as the visionary founder and leader of a successful charitable foundation, whose work had transformed the destinies of thousands of children, opening new horizons and opportunities for them. On the very same day, in another part of the capital, Eugenie solemnly opened an international art exhibition in the heart of London. This large-scale project brought together talented artists from 20 different countries around the world. Her name held the honorable first place among the organizers, not because of her royal status, but due to years of diligent work, perseverance, and professionalism that had undeniably earned her this prominent position. The two sisters, before the start of their significant events, spoke on the phone, exchanging words of support and encouragement. Their conversation was filled with light laughter, brought on by the shared excitement and nervousness inherent in such responsible moments. "Do you remember that pink ball?" Eugenie suddenly asked, her thoughts returning to long-past events, "when we were told to stay home?" Beatrice paused for a moment, lost in reflection. "I remember. Back then, it felt like the end of the world, like everything was collapsing. But now I clearly understand. That wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of our authentic, real life, which we chose and built ourselves." They had no regrets about the events that transpired. The path they had to walk was filled with pain and hardship, and the losses they endured sometimes seemed irreparable. Yet these very trials forged their characters, making them incomparably stronger, teaching them to rely solely on their own abilities, and revealing that a title is merely a word, an empty sound, while a person's true worth is defined by their actions and deeds, not by their origin or lineage. The Spencer sisters continued to shine in the world of high fashion, their names synonymous with elegance and style. The daughters of the Duke of York, however, found their true calling in an entirely different sphere, far removed from social gatherings. Each of these chosen paths held its unique value, and every story of their lives undoubtedly commanded genuine respect. Prince Andrew never returned to public life, preferring a quiet, secluded existence surrounded by the care and love of his family. His grandchildren brought him immeasurable joy and comfort, and his daughters, through their example, proved to the world that the York family was capable of revival and resurgence after any fall, even the most devastating. The pink ball forever entered the annals of social chronicles. Photographs from that significant evening were still regularly published in glossy magazines, serving as a benchmark of refined elegance and impeccable style. But for Beatrice and Eugenie, this event became something immeasurably greater. It turned into a valuable lesson, a severe trial, and most importantly, a turning point after which they ceased to be mere princesses and finally became themselves, discovering their true essence. The evening they decided not to attend the ball paradoxically freed them from the crushing pressure to meet others' expectations, from the unbearable burden of their titles, and from the illusory belief that royal blood itself guarantees happiness and well-being. They built a life they chose for themselves, perhaps not ideal, and likely not as brilliant and luxurious as it might have been within their former status. However, this life was honest, authentic, real, and, most importantly, uniquely their own. And as Beatrice confidently stepped onto the conference stage, and Eugenie solemnly cut the symbolic ribbon at an exhibition opening, both sisters knew deep down they had overcome all difficulties, survived the storm of change, and achieved victory, not by returning to the past, but by creating a future where they undoubtedly had a rightful place. Although the pink ball was long past, the narrative of the two princesses, whose absence became an integral part of it, continued to serve as an inexhaustible source of inspiration. It spoke of how downfall does not mean a final verdict, that a person can rise again even when the whole world turns against them, and that royal regalia may be taken away. But true dignity, if one remains true to oneself, endures for ages. The severe trial, born in the crucible of public scandal, transformed into a path towards true freedom. This path proved incredibly thorny, filled with pain and privation. Yet it was precisely this path that led to the discovery of an authentic life. This was the very life where one is the architect of their own destiny, not a puppet in someone else's play. And this became the cornerstone of their understanding, the key lesson from that fateful evening when two princesses deliberately avoided attending a celebration where others basked in glory and public attention. It is quite probable that if the pink ball had never taken place, they would have continued their former existence, attending official ceremonies with an unchanging smile, majestically wearing precious tiaras, remaining mere archetypes of princesses flickering in the flashy headlines of social chronicles. However, would they ever have discovered their true essence? Found the path to their authentic selves? A question arises. Did the events that transpired become a fatal curse, or, on the contrary, a blessed liberation? And at what precise moment did they realize, with absolute finality, that their former life was irrevocably gone and would not return?